Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. It is September 26th at 2 p.m. Central Time. This is the place where you get to call in and ask all of your questions about anything and everything trans-related to two trans people. The number to call in is 720-619-2288, and there is also a web link in the description if you are a out-of-U.S. caller. I believe it's supposed to be toll-free. Sometimes people say it's not toll-free. I don't fucking know. But, I dropped the F-bomb in the beginning. I've ruined everything. The algorithm is totally going to hate us now.
Terrible.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about some trans stuff. So if you have your hot takes, if you tried to call into the hang-up last night, like there were like 2 or 3 callers who wanted to talk about trans issues last night, and you were told to call in here, now is your time. Get that call in. We do have open lines still, so we would love to hear from you. I'm going to be hosting today. My name is Arden Hart, and with me is Luxander. What's going on, Lux?
Hello, I'm here. Man, I'm so tired from doing the Renaissance Festival every weekend right now, but by this time of the week, I'm usually starting to feel a little bit more rejuvenated, so I'm ready. If you're going to argue, I'm ready to argue. I want to argue with people. That's like, listen, we love it when you call in and you're being all sweet and lovely and you have good questions, but I like to yell at people, so let's try to get some of those.
Yeah, it's a good point to mention that, while we do love giving those advice calls and we love hearing what's going on in your situation, this show is not an open mic. This show is not a storytelling show. This is a show where you call in to pose questions or pose sort of debate topics toward us that we can go back and forth on. So, if you're just calling in to kind of like be like, this thing happened to me, you might not get the most satisfying call. But if you want to talk about, like, you disagree with some element of trans healthcare, or you have an uncomfortable question that you want to ask a loved one, but it would be kind of weird to ask the person that you're close to, we're a great place to ask that question, and it won't be as problematic. So real quick, before we dive into the calls, we are going to look at our poll situation. Last week's poll was, are you registered to vote? Oh my God. I know it's cringe and people hate how often we hammer on it, but we're getting close to the election and it is important to double check because the deadlines for a lot of states are showing up and passing by through in October. So definitely go double check. I forget which link Josie always recommends, but I know vote.org is another one you can use to check your voter registration. It's worth it. Sometimes voter rolls get purged, and sometimes that is a good thing in some elements, but sometimes people who don't need to get purged in those situations. So do check your status. I think this is similar to the results that we had in the chat poll last week, actually. It was more like 80% said yes during the show, so it seems like it is balanced out a lot more. Most of the people who said no are not U.S. citizens. Only 8% looks like they said just straight up no. And I'm going to guess there is definitely a strong contingent of our audience who was in the objecting to vote category. So I imagine that's probably where most of those people come from. But I didn't actually check the comments to know. So not entirely sure.
I checked what the poll was last week, and I did not check any of the answers.
Yeah, normally I check the comments, but we did talk about this a lot last week, so these results are not particularly surprising. We're going to quickly read this week's poll, and then you can answer this in the chat poll right now. This is Lux's idea. If a cisgender celebrity is accused of being trans, do you think they should deny it or roll with it? Those are your two options, deny it or roll with it. Vote in the chat poll, vote in the community tab. We'll go into more detail about that a little bit further down the road, but we would like to dive in and take a call right away. So we're going to talk to, let me change this so that way they know we're coming. Aaliyah in Oklahoma, pronouns are they, them, has a question about looking for creative ways to nurse and parent your children as a gender abolitionist. So Aaliyah, you are live. Talk to us about what's going on.
Okay, so I recently just decided to settle down in a city close to my hometown. And I've decided that I'm going to start a matriarchal line here, but I kind of need to be pointed in direction because I've never really seen, I guess, gender abolitionists, like, in the works for children.
So
It is a very big subject.
Yeah.
Is there any particular area that you're looking to get some clarity?
I guess the social area, like when they go out and get to school and interact with other people, that um, won't won't hold the same views that I do, and could negatively affect my kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think by the time your kid is in school, they will probably have at least some idea of what their gender is like. Um, I think that as far as like the gender abolitionist parenting, it tends to start like it tends to be more of a factor before the baby can communicate for themselves. Like I know somebody who just had a baby and they're basically kind of having fun with it, where people are like, "Oh, what is it, a boy or a girl?" And they're like, "Oh no, they can't tell yet." And then the people are like, "Oh well, shouldn't it be easy to tell by what's in their diaper?" And it's like, "Oh, so you're asking me about my kid's genitals? That's a different question. Um, maybe one that you shouldn't be asking me because it's a little weird." Um, so yeah, I guess I kind of view it as like when it comes to interacting with other people, just like if you're not changing my kid's diaper and like you don't need to know about like what's going on down there. And obviously, like we can't know things about their personality or like they could have internal sex organs that are different from what it looks like they have on the outside. Like, so it's just like kind of an open question there. But I think the best way to deal with it socially is to just try to have fun and try to get like create some levity around it. Um, and you know, it is obviously an opportunity to educate people about trans issues, but I don't know how much you want to take that on for yourself because it's kind of a lot to have to constantly educate people. I mean, kudos to you, absolutely, for wanting to raise your kid kind of in a gender abolition space. But as far as dealing with other people, like you're gonna have to fight with like in-laws and you know deal with like some social the opposite of social lubrication. Like there's going to be some contention there probably.
Mm. So like social tension because of it.
Yeah, I mean it's a deeply entrenched ideology if we're being real. Like the gender binary and that your like genitals equal what your gender is. Like it's pretty deeply entrenched, and you may also have to deal with people being like, "Oh, well, you're one of those." Like you're just trying to turn your kid trans or whatever. As dumb and annoying as that is, it's a very real possibility. But if you just try to keep it light, I think that that can help a little bit. If you're just like, listen, I want to let my kid just be my kid. I want to let them play with whatever toys. I don't think you should treat them any differently. Like, why do people need to know what your kid's gender is? Is it because they want to decide like, oh, am I going to say, hey, little sweetheart? Or am I going to say, hey, little buddy? Like, just treat the kid like, I don't know, let's use little buddy
Okay.
for all the little kids instead of being like, "Oh, I need to treat this one different because it's a girl or whatever."
Mm. I,
Okay. I also think I had a question for like how I should use gender abolitionism within like nursing and stuff. So, because I'm a nursing student at the moment, and I was just wondering if you guys like had any feedback, if you've like from like your experience and how people have helped you with that.
I definitely think it could apply in a medical setting. I mean, I think trans people experience constant assumptions in the medical setting, whether it be, you know, like misgendering assumptions or like quote unquote validating assumptions. Like I've regularly been asked in medical settings if I'm pregnant, even though they regularly force me to put male on my paperwork. Like things like that are really frustrating. And so I think bringing a gender abolition perspective could definitely make a lot of people feel more included naturally in the environment. Things like asking pronouns and stuff like that could be really good because most medical paperwork, they'll ask you like your sex assigned at birth. And like maybe if you identify as trans, maybe they'll ask that, but they don't ask like what your pronouns are very rarely. And that seems like that would be the most valuable piece of information there because it's like, who cares what their label is, really? Like, if you should just know how to refer to that patient and like what medical things apply to that one person specifically. So I think it could help you probably avoid some of the pitfalls that people in the, you know, sort of binary gender mindset are going to fall into. Although I do think there's maybe also some risk of like uh I'm not even sure how much you could integrate gender abolitionism in that setting, just because you're kind of like you would. I mean, you may be like the correct person or whatever, but you're kind of the oddball out. So I could imagine it could cause some complications, but complications that might be worth it, to shake people up and realize like, oh, this is like a valid way of like looking at identities and people and bodies that should be considered in the world. But I imagine you're going to run into some hurdles and obstinate people who are going to make um like truly applying that quite difficult. But I applaud you for aspiring to sort of use that framework when addressing people.
And I'll add
All
that
right.
I think the best thing you can do is like employ this like to be the best ally you can as a medical professional. Like even with small stuff that may not even apply to gender, just like checking in with your patient, like, do you have a nickname you prefer to go by? Or, if you're ever working with pregnant folks, like maybe avoid things like, oh, how is mom doing today? Like, because you just may not know like what terminology the patient prefers, or just making it a regular habit of asking like, um, you know, like you. And I know that there are cis women who don't like the whole pregnant person, birthing person frame, so I would not use that like individually so much. But if you're ever talking generally, you could be like, yeah, so people who are pregnant sometimes run into these complications, instead of saying like pregnant women tend to run into these complications, because let's not forget women are people, and sometimes people who are not women also need that kind of care. So I think the best way to bring that into your field is just to try to maintain that open-mindedness, try to remember that like some people don't like having all of these things imposed on them, and just being like open and receptive to your patients as well, if they like correct you or if they seem uncomfortable with something, just kind of maintaining that level of awareness. I don't know that that's like specifically gender abolitionist, or if it's just more like I prefer gender anarchy to gender abolition. I know it's like a nitpick, but it just feels like it more accurately encompasses the direction that I would like to see things go. Sometimes when people say they're gender abolitionists, they mean they're biological essentialists,
Mm,
and the only gender that exists is the one between your legs. So, but yeah,
sure.
those are kind of my recommendations going into nursing. Which again, super cool to have nurses who are aware of these things. It makes such a huge difference for trans people to be comfortable with those professionals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep that in mind, but I have to cut this call short because I'm unfortunately having some health issues. So,
No
No worries, Aaliyah.
worries.
We
but
appreciate you
thank you
calling
for the
in.
advice. Okay, thank you.
Bye, Leah. All right. Real quick before we move on to the second caller, I see lines are filling right up. I want to
We've got
remind you
some great
guys
ones
to,
today. I'm excited.
yeah, I know it's gonna be a really interesting show. So I want to remind you guys to like and subscribe. It is free. It is super helpful for the show. Helps make Takis algorithm friendly for the lines, since we are kind of like the odd man out in terms of like topics that are covered on this show. Although I think it is relevant to atheism and skepticism and like freedom from religion. The algorithm doesn't always necessarily see it that way. So show us some love if you can. We would really appreciate it. And then I'm going to let you guys know about this week's shows coming up real quick. We don't actually have a lot locked down because the month is changing. There's so much going on before the election, so we're trying to like coordinate lots of different guests. This Sunday on the Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central Time is going to be Matt Dillahunty and Forrest Valkai. So you can't get enough of Forrest's stupid face after last night. You can get in there. Sunday's late show after dark will be Eric from Skeptics and Scoundrels and John Gleason. That's at 7 p.m. Central Time. 6 o'clock on Monday on Skep Talk will be Aaron Adair with unconfirmed guest. Alyssa will be on Chewed Gum with unconfirmed guest. And then Hang Up will be next Wednesday with unconfirmed guest. I'm pretty sure it's going to be Ben and myself next week, but that might change. I'm not attached to our schedule yet. I know Josie's dealing with some health stuff and isn't going to be available for probably a little bit. So we're going to try to take the mantle up while she is out. I saw her in the chat, so I feel more comfortable vaguely hinting at whatever's going on. I think I might have lost
I'm
Lux.
here.
Oh,
Can you hear me? I'm here.
it's
I don't
back.
know
Okay,
why
we're
this is
good.
happening again.
Yeah, that was weird. I totally thought you were just like kind of zoned out on whatever I was saying. Um, I was
Not
like, I
quite. Not
am
this
so
time.
boring. Uh, Last two things before we move on to the next call. I want to remind you guys to join our Patreon. That's patreon.com/call the line. You get access to our like monthly podcast, Live on the Line, getting to know our hosts a little bit better on a personal level. We also do the occasional Q&A session. It is the best way to keep the lights on here on the line. And super chats at the end. If you send a super chat of $5 or more with hashtag Team Arden or hashtag Team Luxander, whoever loses, whoever has the least amount of votes at the end will have to defend some ridiculous proposition as their punishment for losing, for not being able to rally the team. So that, with that said, vote hashtag Team Arden. We have full lines, and there are so many interesting calls. We are going to take, coming up next, Ryan in Kentucky. Pronouns are they, them, who wants to know, is it possible that some trans people are only trans because it's a trend? So, Ryan, you are live. Talk to us. Where's this coming from?
Um, First of all, hello, Arden and Lux. I'm a big fan of Takis. I'll try to tune in every week, at least after the show. But as far as my prompt, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Yeah.
And I also want to preface this. I apologize. I'm neurodivergent, so I have trouble wording things how I intend them. But as far as my prompt, I don't necessarily know if it's even like something I should care about. But as far as an anecdote in my personal life, my youngest sibling, he identifies as male, but like growing up with him, it didn't really seem like he had any kind of gender dysphoria, and he made a friend who is trans, and then he suddenly started experimenting with his gender, and that's perfectly fine. But he also has a history of like he had a friend who had ADHD at one point, and then suddenly he had ADHD as well. So I wonder, like, is it even something I should concern myself with, or is that a discussion that I should have with him to, like, I don't know. Just that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't know where like it all stands.
I mean, like, to answer the initial question, is it possible? Like, of course, these things are possible. Like, I wouldn't rule that out completely, but I also think it's worth mentioning that kids have a pretty solid idea of like what's expected of them with regard to gender performance from a pretty young age. There are some studies that the kids, a young child's ability to notice like differences between groups is really sharpened from like a super super young age. There's like the racist baby study, and so I think while I realize that maybe you didn't necessarily see signs of gender dysphoria maybe in this kid from a young age, doesn't mean they weren't there. And I think for a lot of kids, meeting somebody else who experiences those things can be like eye opening to, oh, this thing that I've been experiencing is not just some secret feeling that I have to keep quiet or something that I don't have to understand. I can actually like explore this and look into this. This is a valid path for people to explore. And I think just because it happens that way doesn't necessarily make their identity less valid or less true. I think there's lots of ways that people come to understand things about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we've it's almost trite to mention it now because it's so referenced in conversations about trans people, but like with the handedness thing, right? Like I forget if it was like the early 1900s, the majority of people were right-handed, and as it became acceptable to be left-handed, the incidence of left-handed people skyrocketed, this epidemic of left-handedness, this social contagion of left-handedness, and then it normalized. Once it was able to be accepted, it reached a certain point where it leveled out. We were able to understand what the actual normal expected rates of left-handedness in people were, and then people occurred within those rates. So these kinds of things are not particularly shocking to me, but yeah, I don't know. Lux, do you have any thoughts on all that?
I think, interestingly enough, I think that queer kids find each other before they know that they're queer. So if there have been instances where I've had a friend group of like I was assigned female at birth, and like I had these two female friends throughout middle school, and then we entered high school, and we even moved away from each other, and like kind of one by one came out as trans. So it's like, is it because your friend is trans that you're coming out, or is it because you all recognized something within each other and then you all kind of ended up in the same place, like, and I think part of the like Arden was just saying, the social pressure to not be trans, as that goes away.
Oh, Lux's camera cut out again. Hopefully we'll get it back in here soon. Yeah, Ryan, do you want to respond to some of those thoughts while we wait to see if we can get Lux back in here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's mostly because my perspective is kind of limited on it. I have two younger siblings. Both identify as a gender other than what they were born with. I mean, so do I. I mean, I'm kind of gender fluid myself. It's why I use they them pronouns, and my middle sibling uses they them pronouns. They're non-binary. Their partner is a trans woman. So I mean, like we're a family full of trans people, it seems, to some degree. And I don't know, like it's my middle sibling and I have talked about it, and they kind of agree that they didn't really see anything either. And it's not that we're not trying to be supportive or anything, because absolutely we want to be 100% supportive of whatever my youngest sibling, whatever they identify with. And but they just have that history of kind of identifying with things that are around them. And
Sure.
I can't really speak for myself on it, because I don't necessarily feel this way, but my middle sibling kind of said it almost feels like it kind of cheapens their experience on it. And I don't know if I agree with that, but that's
Yeah,
just
I
a
think that's
perspective
silly.
that they have.
I think it's silly. I get where it's coming from. I've heard a lot of people say something to that effect, like, oh, like cis passing non-binary folks who don't medically transition cheapen the whole concept of transition and make real trans people look ridiculous. Like for kind of relating to your story, Ryan, my older sibling came out as trans several years after I came out as trans, and they had identified as gay for quite a while, or like some kind of queer flavor, very gay leaning, but like leaving open room for men a tiny bit, maybe. Uh, and I remember when they first came out, it kind of shocked me because I was like, wow, I've been out as trans for all this time and you didn't say anything. But honestly, looking back, it makes perfect sense to me. I think it just took them longer to work through some of the social messaging that they got as a kid. And than it did for me. And honestly, also, even if it is like, let's say you're right that your sibling didn't really have a trans identity and now they're adopting this. If they're happier, if they're like feeling more fulfilled, does it really matter? Like, because like none of us have access to someone's head, right? To know if their identity is legit. So to me, it just kind of feels like even if it's a social contagion, if these people are happier, they're living more fulfilled lives, being able to access transition care, who really gives a shit? you know?
I also feel like it's not a
Yeah, I mean
bad thing if someone is, like, experimenting. Like, I am totally fine with people thinking maybe I might be trans and identifying that way for a couple years in high school, and then realizing that they're not. Like, I don't think that that's a bad thing, and I also do wanna point out that, like, yes, while a lot of us have signs that looking back, we're like, "Wow, it seems like when I was 4, I had a trans," but not everybody does. Like,
Mm.
I guess it's, a little bit more common with people assigned female because you're kind of allowed to transgress gender in ways that people assigned male are not allowed to growing up as boys. But yeah, it's like you're not necessarily going to know based on how the kid acted when they were younger. And also, if it's a phase, then like I don't see why we're expecting teenagers to make like permanent lifelong decisions. about anything. Like maybe they want to date boys for a little while, and then it turns out they only like girls or whatever. Like, we should have the freedom. Like, if there's any time in our lives where we should have the freedom, it should be when we're young.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of the perspective that I just wanted to hear, like, because I mean, living in Kentucky, I live in a very rural part of Kentucky. I don't have a whole lot of access to perspectives on transgender people.
Mhm.
I mean, I have my siblings and I have a few friends, but apart from that, I don't really have a lot of perspective in that. So I guess I just wanted to get your guys' perspective, because you work so much with trans people and stuff, and you have a much broader perspective, and I wanted to, I guess, get that broader perspective from you all.
Yeah, and I do want to add as well that, like, if a teenager starts identifying as trans and there's a social pressure on them to continue identifying with that no matter how they feel, that is how you end up with people who regret medical stuff. Like, if there's a bunch of pressure, like, oh, well, if you identify as trans, then in order to be valid as trans, you have to do this and do that. And if you renege on it, then we're going to make fun of you or whatever. Like, that is more likely to end up in a situation where, like, people feel like, oh, I can't back out now. I have to keep going with it, and I'm expected now to go on hormones or do whatever. Um,
Mhm.
so I think giving people the opportunity to have fun, play, experiment, especially like young people, it should be a fun experience for them and not something where everybody's like, well, are you sure? Is this what you've decided to do for the next 50 years of your life? Like, kids don't need that kind of pressure, TBH.
I think I completely agree with that perspective. No notes.
Cool.
Thank you for calling in, Ryan. I appreciate it. I think this is a topic that people hear a lot, and I think it's something that probably a lot of people have felt before encountering different trans people, because, like we said, you don't have access to everyone's mind. So some people are just going to be inherently more believable to you, probably due to like biases that you have about gender. And some people are going to be, it's going to be less convincing to you for whatever reason. And it just goes to show that, what's convincing to any individual has no bearing on whether or not someone is trans, which is why having like standards for, having to pass to use the restroom or something are just kind of silly. But yeah, thank you so much for calling, Ryan. We appreciate your time, and I hope you call back sometime.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, we're gonna keep rolling right on through and take a third caller before we look at the poll results. Um, Now normally I kind of like to take things in order that they're coming in, but we have two potentially spicy calls today, and I kind of want to get to them. So I'm gonna take John in Ohio if you're feeling it.
Let's go.
John in Ohio, pronouns are he, him. I believe John called the hang up last night. John, you're live on Transatlantic. What's going on?
Hi. I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing all right. I'll
Good,
try
good.
not to go as hard as Jimmy and Forrest did, but you might get a little heat, but it's all right. We'll get there. What do you want to talk about today?
That's okay. That's okay. So you mentioned like the explosion in left-handedness once the social pressures lifted up.
Mhm.
And by the way, yesterday someone on the show that said that, well, once they also lifted up, that the mental health disorders that were associated with left-handedness went away. That's actually not true. People who are left-handed are still more likely to get like schizophrenic type disorders and things like that. But anyways, so the let up went from about 4% to about 12%. But specifically, when you look at populations of young girls, the explosion has been, last time I checked, and this was like a bit ago, it was at 3,000%, and it's still not slowing. And
Uh,
it's very
if you
common.
have an increase from like 3 to 30, that's like a huge percentage increase. So if we're looking at percentage increases, I think that is probably not the best way to go. If like, yeah, okay, in my graduating class, there was like 2 trans people. And then if you look at the same school, now when it's a little bit more accepting, if there are suddenly like 30 out of 1,000, yeah, that looks like a gigantic exponential difference, but that is not comparable to saying the rate of left-handedness was 4% and now it's 12%, because that's a 300% increase right there. So, like, yeah, I
But
mean,
it also stopped and leveled out, and there's no, as far as I know, there's been no sign showing that the rate of people identifying as trans, specifically amongst the young girls, is slowing
So
down.
it's going to be 100% before too long. Oh no. It's just going to keep going
No,
forever.
I mean, I really don't think this is that funny. I mean,
so I do,
yeah,
John,
I'm sorry,
because I do, John, because so the 3,000 number, by the way, that comes from referrals in the NHS. So those come from the amount of referrals that they were getting to the amount of referrals that they were currently getting. It was a 3,000% increase. That doesn't actually indicate how many of those people went on to receive gender affirming care. By the way, those numbers were referrals to a gender clinic to be evaluated for gender affirming care. But I haven't heard anything about those numbers continuing to increase. But that is a number that has been touted uh, for quite a while as a scare. Oh no, like Lux was just saying, like they're gonna eventually everyone's gonna be trans, but really we're not seeing that at all. Like trans people still represent an overwhelmingly minute segment of the overall population. Trans affirming care is still overwhelmingly shown to be beneficial for people's quality of life, improves happiness, better mental health outcomes. So even if I take you at your word,
that's contested
even
still.
actually it's really not
No.
contentious. Even if I take you at your word, even if I actually take you at your word, oh my God, that there is this explosive increase, there's no demonstration that it is actually an unwarranted. Like let's say there is a 3,000% increase and it's a scary number. What if all of those people are genuinely transgender?
That would be, I mean, that would be interesting. I would want to understand what genuinely transgender means, I guess. But can I continue on a couple things here real fast? So, like, for instance, I mean, you guys are always like citing like professional bodies, like, well, like, you know, the World Professional Association for Transgender Care, or maybe it's transgender care, whatever.
World Health Organization
They
or WPATH?
WPATH is what
Yeah,
he was
WPATH.
referencing.
Did you know WPATH also recognizes dissociative personality disorder as a valid disorder?
Yeah, it's real. I don't know why
Like
you
with the
take
guy
issue
who
with.
hasn't split?
So yeah, I mean, if you're going to reference like a media
'Cause
representation
that's
that people, hold on, John, excuse me, people with DID hate that movie. People with DID have a very complex disorder. It's a real experience. It's not like, oh my God, I turn to the left and one guy comes out, and then I turn to the right and it's another guy. It's a complex psychological thing that's considered a disorder because it creates dysfunction in people's lives. But yeah, it's real because we've studied it and confirmed that the experience that individuals are having subjectively, we tend to see a cluster of similar symptoms, and that's how basically everything is diagnosed. So yeah, if the WPATH acknowledges it, it's because we've studied it thoroughly. I don't know why you're taking issue with DID all of a sudden. We're talking about trans issues.
Because I mean DID. Because I'm giving an example that like, well, there are things that the DID that that WPATH recognizes that have been, you know, largely considered by the mainstream like neuroscience community and like, you know, psychologists as being
So
another psychogenic epidemic where you see one report in the news and suddenly it explodes and then goes away. And there's a long history of that with DID. And neurologically, there's no justification for that even being possible.
regardless of
Yeah,
how controversial it is, like the fact that WPATH might accept the existence of one thing has nothing to do with how accurate their assessment of transgender ideology is or transgender people existing. But like WPATH is not my favorite guideline organization. I actually have problems with WPATH. I like the World Health Organization, also like every other major medical organization in the United States, like the American Medical Association, American Psychiatric Association, the Endocrine Society. Like the list goes on and on. These organizational bodies,
so
by the way, this is not a fallacious appeal to authority because these organizations are referencing the data in their summary of why those organizations accept the consensus for transgender healthcare. I'm saying these bodies who have referenced the evidence and come to a conclusion, I am going to accept their conclusion because not only is it in line with the data that I have read on this topic, which is the overwhelming majority of it, but also these people are dedicating their lives to research and study to improve the quality of medicine for people in America. And I think they probably know more than I do and more than you do, John, about these topics.
Maybe. So can I ask you
Maybe?
something?
You don't,
If
wait,
this is
hold
like
on.
the
No,
idea
actually,
of
hold on. No, I want to focus on that. You think you might know more than the American Medical Association about the evidence for transgender people?
I mean, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I'd rather just
I
have the
do, actually,
conversation.
because you said it, and so I kind of want you to elaborate on it. You think you might know
Well,
more than the American
my
Medical
general feeling
Association.
is that the Americans are not very healthy, and so like when I see a lot of
How
recommendations coming
healthy
down from the
Americans are
national
doesn't have
organization.
anything to do with the quality of evidence that an entire medical organization accepts.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to, if this will allow me to keep going down this conversation, like, well, can I ask you something real quick? Why do you think it switched between something that predominantly affected young men and now it mostly affects young women, gender dysphoria, at a rate that's much, much higher? Because young women are also the demographic that's most susceptible to psychogenic epidemics like mass hysteria, historically, way more.
Mass
Wow.
hysteria,
And in
which is
fact, it's
like
That's
very
a can of
common that
worms.
you have one
yeah,
So many
student and
things in
then it
that are
spreads.
wrong.
mass hysteria is also like a highly problematic thing because we're talking about like the whole notion is like the femaleness is what's causing your delusion.
No, that's
Uh,
not what it is at all. Like, it's honestly, and actually, this is going to go into fact another aspect of it. Like, well. Anyway, sorry. No, finish what you were going to say. Women are more social than men, basically.
I don't even know that I completely accept that, but just to what
It's
degree I can
associated with the
accept that,
corpus
to what
callosum.
degree I can, wow, to what degree I can
Yeah,
accept that
John, hold on.
women,
I'm Arden. 1 second. John, we're going to have a problem if you keep speaking over us and interrupting. This is a back and forth. We're going to try our best not to interrupt you unless you say something that is like seriously objectionable. So please just let us talk and get like a couple words out. Thank you.
yeah, to what extent I can accept that, you know, in the United States, women might on average be socialized to be more social. I don't accept that like women are like inherently, uh, what word would it be? Intrinsically more social, like as a matter of their biology. I don't think there's actually like good evidence to suggest that that's the case. Um, yeah, I don't really understand what the point of this is. Why should I care if these people are their quality of life is improving? They're happy with the care that they're getting. The regret rate for trans gender affirming care is significantly lower than the regret rates for countless other uncontroversial medical interventions. Why should I give a fuck that there's an increase in people identifying as trans from any given group?
Well, I'd say, a couple things. I've looked at some of those studies that report that people who start going on hormone therapy, specifically around girls, report better feelings afterwards, but they don't take into account that the fact that testosterone improves your mood generally. It makes you feel more confident, makes you feel more stable, and lowers your anxiety levels. It's associated with testosterone, which is, if you know about like most antidepressants, they make more
Testosterone
available
didn't make me feel
serotonin in
that
your
way.
brain.
Testosterone
Well,
didn't make me feel that way
no.
either. Like, this is another
Okay.
one of those things that
Well,
I heard when I was first being given testosterone, like, oh, it should raise your mood. And yet I continued to struggle with depression for years afterward.
because the effects, you'd have to keep continuing the rate at which you take it. You'd have to keep
Yeah, well,
upping
I
the ante
did.
because your body would obviously get used to it.
I didn't have to
But
continue the rate at which I took it. My body created it normally, and it still made me feel like shit. And overwhelmingly, going on to therapy to reduce the amount of testosterone in my body, increase the amount of estrogen in my body, has made me feel better. So, now, granted,
okay,
I could be an individual
I was
who
talking about
just
I was talking about
hold
when girls
on,
start
John,
taking.
hold on, John. I could be an individual who is completely deviated from the data set. Outliers happen. I'm willing to accept that, but uh, the notion that like testosterone just generally makes everyone feel better. So a person who's assigned female, whose identity you're suggesting is like actually really that of a girl, whose face is masculinizing, whose voice is masculinizing, who's identifying with men all of a sudden, she's not happy because, or they, he, whoever, this individual isn't happy because they're becoming more aligned with their identity and feeling better in their skin. It's really just because testosterone makes you feel good. That's not very convincing.
I'd say a couple things to that. I mean, well, first I would say that like one of the reasons why like about 11% of people who are identified as trans are autistic, and of that,
What does that
like
have to do with anything?
I'm getting into it right now, but it's actually that way is way disproportionate on the young girls. And the reason why that's interesting, so about half of transgender girls have about half of girls who have gender dysphoria show autistic traits, not necessarily an autistic diagnosis, but autistic style traits. And that's interesting because autism is actually associated with a smaller corpus callosum, essentially. And the corpus callosum is basically like one of the main sexual dimorphic characteristics in the brain that causes those personality differences between men and women. And because one of the reasons why
John? So what? What if every single assigned female person who considered themselves trans was autistic? So what? Is that a reason? That doesn't invalidate the data that shows that transitioning gender affirming care is overwhelmingly going to improve their quality of life, improve how they feel about themselves, reduce mental health symptoms. Even if I said every single assigned female trans person was autistic, that doesn't lead you to any kind of conclusion. So fucking what?
Well, first of all, like I said, I'm reading something. This is from 2023. It's from, National Health Organization. It's saying that whether or not, well, this is about suicidal risk outcomes, but it's saying that it's still controversial and inconclusive, and we're years into this right now. And
it's really not controversial. Every major medical organization within the U.S. accepts that gender-affirming care overwhelmingly improves people's quality of life and reduces mental health outcomes, negative mental health.
First of all, you don't usually use self-report data with people who have large amounts of mental health disorders. In fact, that's actually kind of a rule. You don't do that.
That's the only way you can access their quality of their mental health, their quality of life. That's the only way you can access that. There's no blood test. There's no objective measure. There's no objective measure or blood test you can get to say, oh, this person's life's improving. You have to ask, hey, how do you feel compared to before?
Suicidality would be a very telling if it improved that at all.
Yeah, and it does improve that massively. Yeah.
I'm looking right now. This is from 2023 of March, and it's saying it's still inconclusive and there's mixed results.
Wow,
you're looking at
one study.
What website? What study are you looking at?
NHS. This is from PubMed, NIH.gov.
Okay, so typically when we're looking at these things, this concept where we look at multiple different studies and compare the results. One study may find that, let's say the conditions for trans people are particularly difficult in that country or in that study group. So it may be the case that if people are still experiencing a large amount of transphobia, the social rejection aspect can cause people's mental health to be poor and cause them to still have suicide attempts and things like this. But if we're looking at the broad body of data, if we have social acceptance and access to wanted medical care, suicide rates go down.
You're making that claim off of nothing.
It's not off of nothing.
It's not off of nothing.
We've referenced these studies so many times. I'm not going to bring up every single study every single time. That's fair that you don't have to take our word for it. I encourage people not to take our word for it. Actually, if Khaleesi is in the chat, could you drop the link to the trans link tree of trans studies? I'd really appreciate that. Also, you can look up the organizations, the major medical organizations in the U.S. who have affirmed gender-affirming care. You're talking about one study, and as Luxander pointed out, it's not uncommon to have. It's not uncommon to have one study that'll deviate from the expected norms of a treatment group. These things happen all the time.
And also, transphobia is worse now than it was 5 years ago.
Especially
the one I'm looking at was made last year, March, and it's combining 23 different studies.
Okay, well, the overwhelming medical consensus has been in favor of trans healthcare. I would love to see that study, though. If you want to drop that in the chat or send that to Arden at Q&A line. If you want to drop that in the chat or send it to Arden at Q&A line, I would love to review the study you're referencing.
I'll drop it in, but it's really the first one that comes up when you type in suicidality. What did I type in here? I typed in
everybody's Google search is different.
Treatment suicide rate, and that's the first thing that comes up for the NI. It's the first thing that comes up.
Okay, but also Luxander.
Wait, no, actually, no, never mind. The first one that comes up is one from 2019. It's the fourth thing that comes up. It's the second one from the NIH. But yeah.
Well, like Luxander were just pointing out, a lot of people's Google searches are tempered by other things that they're searching, so it doesn't necessarily guarantee that your Google search will be the same, even if you type in the exact same search terms.
That's true. That's true. And it's funny. It is biased towards like more left wing social positions too. Generally, as everyone says.
Biased toward whatever you're searching for.
Yeah.
No. I mean, actually, there's a guy named Robert Epstein. I think his last name's Epstein. But yeah, he uses a live website that actually tracks this sort of thing and scans millions.
Overall, Google may have a left wing bias, but your individual searches are tempered towards you, is what we're saying.
Okay. Anyways, something else interesting, talking about more about psychogenic epidemics. Like, do you know after 13 Reasons Why came out that the suicide rate amongst 10 to 17-year-olds went up by 30%?
Yeah, that's why mental health advocates were like, wow, this is a shit TV show. Please don't watch it. It does all of the things you're not supposed to do in representing suicide, all of the things that can cause people to make attempts themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, but do you, like, young people, especially young girls, like that, again, affected young girls most, are really susceptible to this sort of thing. And, like, the fact that there's a 3,000% explosion rate, maybe it's slowed down a little bit now.
Again, that 3,000% explosion rate is 3,000% increase in referrals for people to go be evaluated for gender-affirming care. Has nothing to do with how many people are actually receiving the gender-affirming care. Those numbers are actually still much lower than that. Although there is still an increase, it's not 3,000%.
So these numbers,
I just want to point out, John, that as we're going through these topics, when you're not making headway with them, you're dropping them and saying, well, let me talk about this other thing. Let me talk about this other thing. I think it's important to note that you can find a study that says just about anything. It's not overturning the consensus on this, which the medical community overwhelmingly aligns on a pro-trans, pro-gender affirming care position. I always welcome new data, better data. All of these things need to be researched better. And absolutely, the extremely difficult thing about researching trans healthcare is that in order to do it ethically, you necessarily have to conduct it in a way that is less than ideal for data. But that is also the case for many different psychological phenomena, many different medical phenomena. Unfortunately, to ethically research them and the efficacy of treatments, we have to conduct studies that are less than ideal for the data we would like to collect. But those things aren't the ones you're calling in about, John. Those things aren't the one that you're calling in to contest. You're calling in to contest trans stuff. That's very curious to me. Why do you think that is, John? Why do you think you have a bias towards anti-trans information here?
When I first heard about like trans when I was like all my time growing up, I thought like, oh, this makes complete sense. Like obviously there's man and female brains. Some people can be born with like a man in the wrong body. Like all that made sense until I started reading neuroscience, and then I was like, oh no, this is actually making less and less sense.
You are literally like a perfect example of Dunning-Kruger.
We've experimented on
that is amazing. No, actually, John, I'm going to interrupt you because this is So you are like literally a perfect example of Dunning-Kruger. You have to know what Dunning-Kruger is, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. So when when you are first getting educated on a topic, not when you know nothing, but when you are just stepping into something and reading something, your confidence on it will vastly outweigh that of those who are experts in the topic. I like how you literally just said, as I started reading neuroscience, I realized that this other preconceived notion I had was totally wrong, except you don't actually have the evidence to support that position. You just have confidence in that position that is completely unwarranted.
Well, can I ask you something? Like right now, the Mayo Clinic is still claiming that puberty blockers have no long-term, they're completely reversible. What do you
correct.
think about
as long
that
as you are following the guidelines for the treatment of those medications, they don't have long-term effects.
See, that strikes me as a big Dunning-Kruger issue because, like, if you think the body is so like simple that you can put it on pause.
I was on puberty blockers.
Not me, you actually. That was the like really classic move there, John.
Yeah.
Not me, Dunning-Kruger. Actually, you. I'm gonna just blame you for doing the thing that I'm doing.
You just did a second ago.
No, John.
Okay, cool.
You said something that was Dunning-Kruger, and then you were like, "Oh yeah, well you're Dunning-Kruger too." And I'm going to put you on mute for a second so we can talk about what puberty blockers are. So the treatment guidelines for puberty blockers are that a student or a client, a patient, has to go on puberty blockers when they're entering 10 or stage 2 of puberty. There's no official age for this. This is just a developmental stage, which can happen. Usually it's around age 12, but it can occur within a sort of variation of ages. You are not to be on puberty blockers for longer than 2 years. If you're on puberty blockers for longer than 2 years, that's when there are long-term health effects to your bone density and to brain development. But all of the guidelines, every medical professional worth their salt will not give puberty blockers for longer than 2 years unless you do it with exogenic hormones. So if you reduce to half the dose of your puberty blockers and add a small dose of testosterone, because let's say this person started puberty blockers at a younger age, and starting full testosterone treatment would be overwhelming at this stage. They would develop ahead of their peers. It's not uncommon for them to do a half dose of hormones and the puberty blockers, because the only issue where there become long-term side effects of puberty blockers are when there is a complete absence of those developmental hormones in the body. Even if you do the half dose, most of those long-term side effects are actually put out way further. There are no long-term side effects of puberty blockers as long as you follow the medical guidelines. I know this shit. One of the hosts on this show who educated me on this topic for a debate literally showed me the guidelines that he as a doctor goes to when a patient asks about puberty blockers. I've literally looked at the documents that doctors get when they're referencing this stuff. So yeah, you can take your U2 and shove it up your ass, John.
So what happens after 2 years that makes the effect suddenly matter? And is it like on the exact day, like on that 24-hour mark? That it's like, well, now
obviously it's not on the 24-hour mark, you smarmy dickhead.
Being on Depo-Provera for 2 years also damages bone density. So it's like being on certain hormones, like for birth control, Depo-Provera is birth control, can also cause bone density problems after approximately 2 years. Because
I don't
you
think
need
to take birth control either, honestly.
Okay, wow. Okay, cool. Whatever. Anyway, that's not the topic right now. Let's not get on
It's bad
that.
for your memory. It literally shrinks your hippocampus over time.
As we said, being on these medications for under 2 years, as is the guidelines, and then proceeding to exogenic or returning to your endogenous hormones negates all of these long-term side effects in most cases. Actually, the doctor who helped me do that just showed up in chat. Hey, Dr. Ben.
Hi, Ben.
So can I say real quick, like it's better to understand the body, not as like a machine, but more like an unfolding symphony. And you can't just hold something in back like that without expecting a number of like cascading irreversible effects.
No, that is complete conjecture on your part. You have no evidence to suggest. You have no evidence to suggest.
You're like, oh, it's common sense that it would have an effect long term.
Yeah, you are.
I think it would.
Yeah, you are literally just doing an argument from common sense. These are the guidelines from data that has been established for cis kids, for precocious puberty, mind you. That's where these data come from that we are using to inform how they apply to trans kids.
I'm pretty sure that was a game of telephone where at some point someone was like, well, if 2 years is like the limit as far as like, there won't be any.
Again, that is complete conjecture on your part. I think this must just be a game of telephone, actually. I think that's telephone. That's not data. Complete conjecture on your part. You have no idea about that. And you're muted, by the way, so I can see your levels dancing. You're talking. Nobody can hear you. Because all you're interested in doing is bullshit conjecture that you have no evidence for. Bullshit pointing to random things that have no effect on the efficacy of trans healthcare. Like, oh, well, some of them might be autistic. Oh, well, some of them might be girls. Oh, well, there's more referrals going on. You keep pulling shit, one thing out of another out of your ass. I don't know if you're using one hand or two hand to get all that shit out of there, but you're trying really hard to pull all these different varying facts that have nothing to do with your actual point. And I'm honestly kind of done with this call because you haven't made a single good argument. You are just gesturing vaguely towards countless random things that have done nothing to help you make your point. So I'll give you one last word, and then we're going to say goodbye to you, John.
The definition of a crime against humanity is...
Oh, no, actually, I'm just dropping you because that's so fucking stupid. The definition of crime against humanity. You know what is a crime? What should be a crime? Is denying trans kids the evidence-based healthcare accepted by every major medical organization. You know what should be a crime? Not giving kids evidence-based medicine. But if you want to cry that, well, some people are autistic and trans, I genuinely don't give a fuck. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no expertise. You are the definition of Dunning-Kruger, John. You should be embarrassed. All right.
Yay. Let's talk about the poll.
Hell yes. Oh, that was fun.
Yeah,
John called in to
all over the place.
Yeah. So, all right, let's see what the results are. You can kind of go into the details of this if you want while I get the numbers on a.
Yeah. So the question for this week, the poll, we had a chance for you to answer in the chat there. If you want to go to the community page and leave your answer, you can vote there and type a comment. So if a cisgender celebrity is accused of being trans, do you think that they should deny it or roll with it? And the reason why this is the question for this week is that if y'all maybe remember back in the day, classic back in the day, Lady Gaga was having all these accusations and she sat down for an interview. I mean, she was being asked this at basically every interview, but Anderson Cooper was like, yeah, so there's a rumor that you have a certain male appendage. And Lady Gaga's like sitting there, like sucking and chewing on ice and stuff. Classic interview. And she was basically like, why would it matter? Like, maybe I do. My fans don't care, and neither do I. And she is not trans. She does not have, quote, a male appendage. Uh, and she was recently speaking about this because she was on like Bill Gates has a little show that he's doing. And she was basically like, I don't think that it would benefit people who, like a young person who's being accused of that. I don't think if I respond with shame, it's going to positively impact those other people. She was basically like, this is one situation where I think that me correcting a rumor would actually potentially do more harm. And I know I've seen some people, like I've seen at least one YouTuber who people were like, wow, you have big hands. Are you a man? And she was like, nuh-uh. And it just comes across a little wrong to me. Like, so is there even a point to correcting the record? Or is it better to like quash this line of inquiry by just being like, why would it matter? Like, it doesn't, like, who cares? I'm a
Yeah.
famous person. Like I'm out here doing my music thing. I'm out here doing my meat dress thing. It shouldn't matter whether I
Right.
have a penis or not.
Also, I think this is interesting. So 73% in our chat poll said just roll with it. 58% said roll with it in the community poll, and 42% said you should deny it versus 26. Almost double the amount of people in the community poll said you should deny it, which I think is really weird. Somebody in the community poll had a good comment, which is that kind of, what good is denying it? Because with the kind of people who are transvestigating and who are going to imply that you're trans, denying it is like, well, you would deny it if you were really a man in a dress, so I don't even believe you. Like, there's no point in denying it. It just kind of adds fuel to the fire. So I really do love her approach of just being like, nah, who cares? Like, what if I did? What would it affect? Like, do you suddenly not like my music because you know that I might have a penis? Yeah, so
Fun stuff.
no surprise that our audience is more on the chill side of things. But with that said, you guys, if you didn't get to vote in the chat poll, you can go vote in the community tab. I think I'm probably going to close the lines because we have full lines right now, and that is 6 callers to get through before the end of a show, and we're already pretty much an hour in. So,
And if you enjoyed Spicy Arden, you can vote hashtag Team Arden with your $5 or more super chats, or you could vote Team Lux. I didn't get as much. I didn't get as much in there that call, except for like making fun of him. But you can vote. The loser has to do a punishment at the end. $5 super chats or more. We'll read them out, and you can vote. So thank you, everybody. Hit the like button. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I apologize if I steamrolled you at all. I just,
That's
man, there's
no big
certain
deal.
things people say that will trigger me onto like I can't let that go. I have to Pitbull. Pitbull's a terrible reference because Pitbulls are like the sweetest group of
They're so
dogs
sweet.
ever.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like my mind says. I'm like I have to just latch on.
Totally fine.
All right, why don't we take? There's actually a fair amount of calls that could be spicy, but I think most of them are coming from kind of the same position of Ryan earlier on. So let's take Matthew in Ohio next, because I think he's probably the true spicy one that's left on the line. And then we can start working through the rest of the calls in sort of the order that they came in. Does that sound good?
Sure.
All right. So we're going to talk to Matthew in Ohio. Biggest fan of Transatlantic, our biggest fan in the entirety of the United States. Matthew in Ohio thinks tomboy should be accepted, but the opposite shouldn't be. So go for it, Matthew. Got a tall order ahead of you. Oh, I'm so sorry, Matthew. I actually had the line muted because of the end of the last call. You're good to go now. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. I just hope you guys didn't waste all your spiciness on John, because I know you guys wanted more spicy sauce. No relation, by the way, even though we're from the same state. Well, living in the same state, rather. So obviously, I told you guys I'd probably call in a month. I'm still doing some research. This is my last week where I'm really diving into it, like I said. And it's looking like maybe, and I don't know yet, but I'm looking more into the gender abolitionist kind of thing, if anyone's interested in that. But you never know. My mind can change. But I was thinking this morning, and I was just like, why is it okay? And I think, okay, before I get into this, I heard that tomboy is now a slur. Is that true, or am I missing something?
I don't
No,
think so.
I don't think
Nobody
so.
I know on the left thinks that, but
Okay, yeah. Okay, so all right. Someone was saying it was when I was calling in. They were like, "Isn't that a swear?" And I was like, "I don't think so." But I digress. So I was thinking, and Luxander said this: why can females transgress gender, but boys can't? You know, and I was kind of troubled by the thought. And then the answer kind of came to my mind was that a tomboy is representing strength because men are stronger, courage because that's mostly linked to men. Not saying that women can't have courage, but these things are mostly linked to men and strength and moving, for lack of a better term, and this is probably where it's going to get spicy, upwards in like, in honor and stuff like that, versus a boy who wants to be a woman is taking a more of a weaker role. He's taking a role that is more, that we need to defend because we have to defend women in certain situations. And so now that you put yourself in a woman position, we also have to defend you. But if a woman takes courage and says, "Hey, look, I'm here to fight," we're like, okay, good. More people to fight. So that's kind of my point of view of why tomboy is accepted, and I don't even know we don't even have a name for the girl, unless you guys know one. For the boy doing the girl thing, is not accepted.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is deeply revealing of like a pretty wildly misogynistic point of view, which I already know that about you, Matthew. We've discussed this before. Yeah. Like you think that women are weak and not and like inferior. I mean, you kind of realized as you were saying it that it was probably not a good thing to say in public on a live stream to like a couple hundred people, but like you believe that women are inferior. And I think that, there are completely different kinds of strength that men and women inhabit. Like the strength that it requires for a woman to spend all day taking care of her children, the strength that it takes for a woman to give over her entire body's resources to grow a human being and then shove it out of her vagina, like the strength that it takes to carry a baby on your hip all day while doing the laundry and cooking and everything. Like, I think that this view sees women's accomplishments as inherently lesser than because women have been relegated to this status in society as like, oh, well, you're just in the home, whatever. But we know that historically, if you look at the, like, let's say medieval, whatever, the peasant class, women did hard labor just as much as men did. Men had to stay and take care of the kids and cook and work in the field to contribute. We only really see a delineation of social roles when we start to look at the higher classes, like at the upper class. Yeah, like, oh, the women are dainty and the men go out and do the big strong thing. So yeah, I mean, as it relates to the trans thing, why do we think that like the nurturing strength of women is inferior to the like brute strength of men? And we also know, obviously, because people are bimodally sexually dimorphic, that there are women out there who are lifting big heavy weights and they're like winning championships at like bodybuilding. So it's not like
I would
women are
accepted out the
exclusively
rule.
Okay. Well, it also has to do with like a complex social structure that tries to force people into certain boxes. And honestly, like this is the real reason why socially boys are not allowed to deviate is because like the thing that patriarchy seeks to uphold more than anything else is the supremacy of men, which requires them to maintain a very strict set of behaviors and expectations. So like, yeah, boys having long hair gets punished in a way that girls having short hair doesn't get punished because like society can allow for some deviation amongst the women, but if we see deviation amongst the men, then that challenges the entire concept of male supremacy, which, like, obviously that's like the entire reason why we have sexed sports. It's like, because if women were able to compete against men, they would win relatively often, and male supremacy can't tolerate that kind of challenge.
Aren't women allowed though to play men's sports if they are men's sports closed only to men? I know it's called men's sports.
Well,
the majority of men play it, but are they closed?
There are some co-ed leagues, but mostly it's sexed.
There are some sports that will do like an open league and a women's league where technically the women can compete in the open. But I mean, Matthew, to your point, like, if you're just observing society and you're not saying you agree with it, then I don't think there's anything spicy there. Like, I feel like it seems very trivially obvious to anyone who's grown up in America that young girls are able to transgress gender with less punishment than boys are. That seems just like trivially obvious to me. But
I think
if
he's
you're
saying he agrees with it.
If you're saying it's a good thing, and you agree with it,
I
don't
agree with it is because.
Sure, go on, explain.
No, I was just saying I agree with it because I just agree that men are, when I say strong, forgive me the lack of better terms, I do agree that women pushing a baby out of their body part is definitely something that I couldn't do as a man. So I'm not saying that they're weaker in that sense, but I think maybe what I'm saying in certain categories where it matters, for lack of a better term again, women are weaker. For example, lifting, and not only that, they're in a more vulnerable, maybe vulnerable is better, a more vulnerable position when they are giving birth, when they are nursing. So they're in those vulnerable positions. So when a young boy says, "Hey, I want to be like a girl," what you're doing is you're putting yourself in a more vulnerable position. And I don't want to. I say lowering, and I know I sound like I'm talking about superiority here, but that's just kind of where my brain goes. You're kind of taking a step down in a sense and saying, "Okay, I'm going to stop being one of the defenders, and I'm going to be the one that need to be defended."
And you're just talking about like a boy who is feminine. You're just talking about a boy who likes musical theater, right? You're not talking about like a boy who is
not at
transitioning.
all.
Okay, well, so how does that work?
A boy who likes musical theater could probably punch another boy in the face.
Okay, so is that's not what you're not? So we're talking about two different things. Then my understanding of this conversation has just shifted because a tomboy.
Musical theater is there is some flamboyance to it, but I wouldn't say it's a girl thing. If that makes sense.
But let's
not what
say
every
ballet.
man in my life thought when I was doing musical theater growing up.
Fucking
but okay.
true.
I'm sure probably. Yeah. I'm sure society probably would say that's girly, but I probably deviate on that.
Like
probably
cheerleading.
Not.
Let's say cheerleading or ballet.
Mm-hmm.
If a boy is doing cheerleading and ballet, you think that he is not able to physically perform the same because he's taking on feminine.
Depending on his role, right? Is he being the swan princess, or is he being the guy that holds up the swan princess? Now, if he's saying, "I'm going to be the swan princess," that's where the problem would be for me.
Why?
Okay.
It doesn't even make sense,
why?
though. You're not making
We have
like,
an
a case
approximately
for why.
equal number of tomboys and feminine boys. Like, it should balance out, shouldn't it?
Right.
Like, we should have some tomboys coming up and carrying all the chairs. Like,
I'm not sure I'm seeking homeostasis or anything. I'm just saying that my mindset right now is the more fighters we have, and the less people that need to be defended is better. So, like I said, if a woman says, "Hey, I'm going to do the boy thing," we're like, "Yeah, go ahead. We need more defenders." And if a boy says, "I'm going to do the girl thing," it's like now we have less defenders, and now we have an extra person to defend.
I think this is
I
wild.
just want to. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It's okay. I was kind of take this in a different direction. So if you want to touch on something, you can. I'll just write down a note about it.
Yeah, mine is short. I was just gonna say, like, speaking of like protecting and defending, I'm assigned female at birth, and I'm a better shot than my husband. So I don't personally feel like I need to be defended because I am more capable of using a gun than like one of the most like strong and persistent men I know in my life.
What if you lost that gun, Lux?
Yeah, I also have a knife, and I also have like, I'm small, and this is true whether you're male or female. If you're small, you know that the fight needs to end quickly. So I'm also mean. That's the difference.
Okay.
So
like, yeah, even being smaller, like what do you on about defending people? Go ahead,
No,
Arden. Go ahead.
I agree
Yeah.
in general. A fight needs to end in general. This is not the movies, right? It's not Mortal Kombat. If you're in a fight, you end it as quick as possible. And maiming is, even if you're a big dude, it's like that's the
So kind of
that ends
building
the
off
fight.
of this
So
notion of
yeah,
we're not in the movies. You're talking about like, oh, we need more defenders, which I think is really curious and like one of the most privileged nations on the planet that anyone here could be concerned with needing more fighters. It's like almost like this weird like fascist like, oh, when we enter
yeah.
civil war in the next 2 months, we're gonna need more militants on the front lines, which is wild because like indigenous communities who lived in North America before it was colonized were probably far more at risk of day-to-day harm, and they overwhelmingly well, not overwhelmingly, there were different tribes that made room for gender aberrant behavior, particularly assigned male individuals inhabiting like the roles of women. In some cases they were even like revered and elevated to like shamanic status, like given like, oh, they're have two spirits, they have wisdom and things like this. I'm probably honestly also I'm probably going to get roasted, and deservedly so, for not representing those communities completely accurately. My point is to say that it's really weird from the American perspective, where we are relatively safe day to day, to think that any male needs to not be the ballet princess if that's what he thinks he's going to be happier in, because he might need to be a fighter. What fights are you engaging in, Matthew, that you think that we're at a dearth for warriors on the front line?
Are you kidding me? No. No, I'm just joking. No, I think when I look at it, I'm not talking, and I see what you're saying. You're making it seem like we're waiting for a war. I just mean like almost biologically and psychologically what I mean by fighters and defenders. I don't mean like we're ready for some type of war that we're ready for now. There could be a war coming on, but I mean more psychologically.
So
If that makes sense.
Well, your argument makes sense, like in the sense of like, if the premises were true, it would make sense. But I don't accept that the premises are true, because, as I just pointed out, there are communities who existed on the North American continent before it was colonized who did not have that same innate thing that you're talking about. There have been communities, cultures throughout history who have not held gender to the same esteem that you do in this way, that have allowed for gender deviant behavior between assigned male and assigned female individuals. So it's clearly not an innate biological thing. It's quite obviously a culturally imposed thing.
Well, let's just say we're traveling, right? And this is just an example of indigenous people, or we're coming from the what was it, the Bering Strait, I think it was called. And let's say we're traveling, and we have a pregnant woman who's very soon to give birth, maybe another nursing woman that just recently gave birth, and then we have men that are leading the charge, making sure everyone is safe and all that. And then there's one young man that says, hey, look, I want to do what these ladies are doing. I want to nurse, and I want to act as if I just had a baby, that would be problematic. But one of the women that maybe has two kids, maybe grown up, says, hey, look, I want to be on scouting and I want to fight and defend, we would be okay with that. But with a young man, we would be like, that's not a good idea.
I mean, this is kind of operating under a dramatic misunderstanding of how societies work, because you need people to produce food. So if a man doesn't want to go be a warrior, do you know what he does instead? He hunts, he gathers, he takes care of the children. Like, what are you defending if the children die because they're hungry? You know what I mean? Like, a society is made of many different types of people. This is how we have survived as a species evolutionarily. Like, this is why Homo sapiens is at the top of the fucking food chain, because we delineate between individuals. Like, not every person has to be able to do every single thing. We have one person whose dedicated job is like, I'm the sentinel, I stay up at night. We have another person whose dedicated job is taking care of the children. And then like 5 people who go and tend the agriculture, right? Like it's so weird to think, and this is what I was talking about earlier, Matthew, about the rigid idea of men's role in society. Like this idea that men are exclusively warriors. Like this is fucking Sparta or something. Like
again,
whereas,
like I said, if the man wants to lift girls up, to the swan princess up, that's fine. If he wants to hunt and gather, that's fine. But if he's taking a position that is weaker, I think that's where the problem is. Not necessarily
You haven't actually demonstrated it's a problem is my problem. Like,
or that it's weaker.
You're just vaguely gesturing towards social norms and being like, this is socially valued less, and so they shouldn't do it. But it's like, you haven't demonstrated that it's biologically a problem, that it's socially a problem. You're just basically saying that it's socially abnormal, and I don't like things that are abnormal. That is like the summary of what I'm getting from what you're saying.
No. So let me make it clear. The weaker or vulnerable, rather, is taking the when a woman is nursing or giving birth. Yes, she's showing like great strength, but at the same time, she's very vulnerable. At the same time, and she can be stronger than all the men there that protecting her.
And when men poop, they're weaker. Like, what's your point? When people do certain things, they're more vulnerable than when they do other things. Like, it's not. You're still failing to really make a connection to a meaningful, that's
actually a good point that you make, Arden, because when men poop, right, they sit down to poop, but you don't have to sit down to pee. But women have to both sit down to poop and pee. And I know this sounds really ridiculous. This may sound so ridiculous, but it is it's a certain point that you have to realize. There's just more vulnerability point checkers on the check mark for women than there are for men.
No.
You have balls that are outside your body. Are you really going to tell me that women are more vulnerable than men? I'm sure you've been nailed in the nads before, Matthew, and that I have a greater understanding for how that shit feels because your balls are innervated like your inner organs are. It feels like nothing that you could possibly experience otherwise, right? You have like this thing outside your body that is extremely vulnerable, and also it's better for your prostate if you sit to pee, TBH, but like, I don't know how you're going to claim that even a woman, hold on, Matthew, hold on 1 second. I don't know how you're going to claim that a woman who is stronger than all the men around her and who is out there with the warriors is still fundamentally more vulnerable than the men who are her peers.
I would not say she is fundamentally more vulnerable. I would say this is why we have the tomboy thing, right? She's taking the position of strength and courage that we need at the point right now. So, but you made a point, right? So we're making check boxes, right? Vulnerability for men, vulnerability for women. I would guarantee you that you would check more boxes for women being vulnerable than men being vulnerable.
I bet you would, Matthew.
I think all of us would. The three of us here on this call would.
You have just as many eyes. You have more vulnerable balls than I do. Like, you have just as many ears that can be ripped off. You have just as many knees that can get kicked sideways. Like, I think it's pretty even, except that you have balls and I don't. Like, you have one glaring vulnerability that I don't.
I have more muscle density as well, and more.
That doesn't make a difference when we're fighting.
Well, it depends.
Listen, Matthew, if you had come in here with just a social observation, I would have no problem with what you're saying. But again, you're trying to take a social trend within a particular culture in a particular time in a particular dynamic and to suggest that it is ubiquitously a biological fact amongst all humans ever, and that is just not the case. Like, you do not have a case for that at all.
I would like to believe in a social trend. I mean, like I said, I'm doing the research and all this stuff, and I would like to have my mind changed.
As I pointed out earlier, there are cultures that don't fit into your box that you're doing here at all.
I know there are many cultures where women give birth and nurse their children, and have weaker bodies and have less muscle mass than men.
Okay, that's not really related to what I said. It's like vaguely related, but not really.
It's very related because you're kind of missing the point that this really is what happens in all societies. Women give birth. I am
not missing the point. I get your point. The point is that my point is that you don't actually have a point, and you're failing to actually make a point. You're just vaguely gesturing at social trends and, again, pretending that they are an innate biological fact, when, again, these are just elements of the culture that you are in currently. You haven't actually demonstrated any risk. By the way, it has been like an accepted like hypothesis, an evolutionary hypothesis, that the reason there are some males who take on these feminine roles, like helping raise the family, are like the gay uncle hypothesis, that it actually helps the overall survival of the species. Because mind you, evolution isn't about the survival of the individual's genes. It's about survival of the population's genes, and having an individual who defers from reproduction to help care for the family could, in theory, help the reproduction of the entire population. It's a pretty well accepted hypothesis amongst evolutionary biologists as to why sexual deviations like this exist. and exist in our closest ape relatives, by the way. So you haven't really done anything to me to demonstrate a actual like case for a biological need for us to commit to the American 21st century gender roles as a matter of biological fact.
I don't think this is American 21st century art, and at the very
It
least,
really
it's been
is,
going on
though.
way longer.
As I pointed out, like on 18 different occasions in this one call now. But since we're going in circles and you're just kind of saying, "Oh, I don't think so," I think that's probably a good place to end the call. So we're probably going to let you go, Matthew. You can have a last word if you want.
Alrighty.
All right. See you later. I guess you didn't want a last word.
Yep. All right. We got plenty of other callers today.
I love when I'm like, I don't think you're making the case. And he's like, well, I did. Okay. Good one, man. Right. You got me.
Got him.
All right. Now I think we'll probably just take all the rest of the callers in the order you all came in. So if you are in the queue, please hang on. We will be getting to you shortly. But up next, we've got Eva, and Alabama pronouns are he, him. Wants to know what happened. What if his brother ends up being homeless for being trans? So interesting question. Hopefully, this is like. I'll let you set it up. Go ahead, Eva. Sorry.
Hello. I'm so nervous. So I had called in previously to the atheist experience, I think it was. And cool. They referred me this way.
Okay. You probably called the Sunday Show. I don't think the Atheist Experience would refer you to any shows on the Line Network, but
it was the one with Matt.
Okay. Yeah, maybe I was mistaken. It's fine.
It doesn't matter. Go ahead.
So for 18 years, I knew my brother as my sister, and now that he wants to pursue the like actual transition part of his like newfound life as a man, we've run into a lot of friction with our parents, who are not home right now, blessedly, so that I can call the show. And so he's like just been like such a cool person and always been the most socially well regulated of all of the siblings who grew up in this family. We're Catholic. He is making money for himself. He's doing well in school. He's just always been all around great as a person. But all of a sudden, since he's a he and not the the little princess that my dad has always envisioned him as being, there is doubt as to whether he will be welcome around the house any longer.
Mm-hmm.
The plan right now.
Brother still lives at home.
Yeah, basically, he's in college. The plan right now is for him to go into grad school and maybe come out with a job, but like there is still this possibility that he'll come back home and not be welcome, because while he's in senior year of college, he plans to start paying for his own HRT. And if he comes back looking completely different and like sounding different and just being out, because he plans to come out after that he won't be able to go anywhere. And I don't have money either.
Yeah.
That's definitely tough, for sure. I think, the best thing that you can do is be supportive, obviously. And every person has to make their own decision. Like, it might be the case that, well, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, your brother is waiting until after undergrad to come out. And I'm assuming that that's because there's going to be a greater likelihood that he's going to be able to kind of support himself after that point.
He's going to try and become a therapist.
Yeah, which is awesome. So yeah, I mean, I think the best thing that you can do is just like help if your brother does come out to your parents, you know, like making sure you have his back and making sure that you know, you're clear to them that like, listen, if you kick him out or if you tell him he's not welcome at home, you know, I'm not really going to want to stick around either. Like, I consider that morally reprehensible, and I'm going to try
Wow.
to find somewhere else to live, you know, or like I'm going to support him no matter what. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean like you have to move out and lose the support of your parents. But you know, being able to say like, it matters to me is this is a moral stand. You know, we should love him no matter what. I'm going to accept him. So you have conflict with me if you have conflict with him. Like, I think that's probably the best position that you can take on this is just going like, yeah, it's not acceptable to me if you tell him he's not welcome at Christmas. I'll go do Christmas at my brother's house if you don't want him here for Christmas. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It might also be worth looking into, Eva. I'm forgetting the word, so maybe somebody in chat can, or if one of the two of you remember or know the word. When you are going into a grad school program, a lot of them will offer like reduced housing prices or even paying you to take a master's course if you agree to be like an adjunct teaching faculty part time. So those are an option that a lot of people will use to basically get through grad school while paying like as little as possible and actually earning money in a lot of cases. So I'm forgetting what the word for that is right now, but it is available to not most,
Yeah.
many grad school programs. And so he could look for one that specifically has something like that.
That is the plan right now. He's going to go into grad school, and he'll have some security there as far as living.
It's not
just,
stipends, Chad.
after that.
It's like, I'm forgetting the word. It's like, for some reason I want to say conservatorship, but it's not that. It's something similar.
No.
Not scholarship. Goddamn, fellowship? Maybe. No. So Eva, you're also living with your parents. Is there any chance the two of you can work together? Like, if you're, are you in like a major city or a more rural area?
I think this is a pretty big city. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to think because usually having roommates can be a good way to reduce the cost of living pretty significantly. And there are lots of very pro-queer like housing groups in pretty much every major city that can be like the like queer housing connection or something like that. So you could look for some resources through there that might allow you to look for a place, and you might have to pick up a few hours of work somewhere, but you could be paying significantly less than the standard cost of living in your area if you have a couple roommates.
I see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a terrible situation, though. There's not much I feel like we can offer other than like empathy for the fucking bigotry that is encompassed in that, and best of luck for finding a path that hopefully is the best for the both of you.
It's just wild because I didn't think of my parents like this.
Sometimes conservative parents will surprise you too. Like, sometimes they say a bunch of anti-trans or anti-queer stuff, and then they actually are confronted with it in their family, and they're like, well, shit. Like, and then they kind of do, maybe not necessarily a 180 on it, but it's not uncommon. What was it, like Dick Cheney's daughter coming out as a lesbian, and then he changed his position on like gay marriage. So it takes time to, making it clear where you stand is important, but also like giving your parents grace, I guess that's the Christian thing to say. To say like, yeah, I recognize that this is hard for you, and I'm hoping that you evolve on this. And if you need someone to talk to, like, obviously, I think that we should not burden trans people as much as possible in these situations. So if you feel that you're in a position to be the one who talks to your parents and tries to help convert them over, basically, that could still be a very valuable role for you to have, especially if you're like not ready to move out, and you're still stuck in that situation because it's hard to get a job right now, and I get that. Like the number one thing you can do is just be like the one who helps them try to get through it, and it may take a few years, honestly.
Yeah, it's really hard. Whenever he and I talk about this, we end up just crying together.
Yeah.
It's just like the most awkward times of my life.
It's good that you have each other, though. You know, not everybody has a sibling who's supportive, and not everybody has, like, a sibling who they can even like, you know, you, I'm sure, also are gonna have trials and tribulations in your life, and, like, knowing that you have this close bond with your brother, it means that you're always gonna have somebody. Even if things go south with your parents, you know, you're still always gonna have that family to turn to. And, yeah, like, as hard as it is, I'm really glad that you guys have each other because it makes such a huge difference in every difficult situation that you're gonna come up against.
True. Yeah, very true.
Okay, I think I've taken enough of your time. I can kind of go look into, like queer-friendly housing.
Yeah, definitely look
Yeah.
that up. Best of luck to you, Eva, and call in and update us if you find a solution that works. It could be really helpful to the audience who maybe, are in similar positions. I'm sure you're not alone in this. Uh, Queer people have definitely higher rates of being unhoused than other communities. So, uh, yeah, thank you for calling in and best of luck, Eva.
Thank you, Luxander. Thank you, Arden.
Bye.
Thank you. Being queer is
Alright.
hard.
Yeah. I also realized that he said they were in Alabama, which I
Ooh.
also kind of, elucidates some of what's going on there. All right.
Gracious.
Next caller. We have 4 left on the line. We're going to get to all of you. Jacob in Tennessee, pronouns are he, him, says, what's the appropriate way to deal with healthcare of trans youth? It's a very complex question, but Jacob, why don't you set it up for us? What's going on?
Yeah, I guess forgive me a little bit. I'm forgetting a little bit. I'm a little bit of a fangirl. I've been following Matt for quite a while, and a bit of a fangirl of art, and nothing against the other co-hosts. So forgive me
okay,
a little
she's
bit
been
here.
here
Let me
longer.
compose let me compose myself here. I'd like to first start off by, we both have the same goals here, in terms of, what's best for the treatment of transgender kids. I have a different opinion, and I'd like to attempt to back that up with an article. I called in yesterday, and I kind of misspoke a little bit, and you have to let me unpack this for a second. I've kind of went through this and taken notes, and you have to let me go through this for just a second, and then give me your take.
So
And
Jacob,
just to give
before
you
you
a
do
little bit
that,
of
sorry, I'll let you finish
Mhm.
your point, but I'm going to chime in before you do that, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to say, I'm never going to promise anyone on this show that they're going to get uninterrupted time. If you say something
That's
that is flatly wrong, I'm going to interject. So I want to give you time to set
that's
up your
fine.
case, and I'm not going to interject for the smallest of thing if it's something that I can come back on and touch. But if it starts to feel like a gish gallop where I'm getting like 1, 2, 3 false claims, I'm going to stop you in the middle of your thing and interject. So with that said, go ahead and give me what you want to give. Go for it.
Okay. Well, what I'm reading here is an article that deconstructs a medical publication from the Journal of Overstreet Verlager from the Danish. And so I just went through that article and kind of highlighted the important things. But it'll take me about 2 minutes to unpack this a little bit. So I'll give you the case here. So the Medical Journal of Østerlagen, the Journal of Danish Medical Association, confirmed that there has been a marked shift in the country's approach for caring for youth with gender dysphoria. Most youths referred to the gender centralized clinic no longer get a prescription for puberty blockers, hormones, or surgery. Instead, they receive therapeutic counseling. In the course of less than a decade, like every Western country, Denmark experienced an exponential increase in the number of youth people presenting with gender dysphoria. In 2014, there were only 4 documented pediatric cases who requested gender assignment. By 2022, the number of referrals grew by 8,700%. Similar to 7,000% increase in less than a decade, witnessed by a number of Western countries. As the number of young people wishing to undergo gender reassignment increased, so did the rate at which Danish gender clinicians transitioned them. However, following systemic review of evidence conducted in Europe and the subsequent reversal of the gender affirmation paradigm in favor for a cautious, developmentally informed approach that prioritizes psychosocial support and non-invasive resolution of gender distress in Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, have made a quiet but resolute shift to treat most youth representing with gender dysphoria with supportive counseling rather than puberty blockers, hormones, or surgery. In 2022, only 6% of those referred in Denmark's centralized gender clinic were prescribed endocrine intervention. I'm almost done. Puberty blockers and/or cross-sex hormones. The rationale for this shift was explained in a recent medical publication in Ugersche Forlager, Weekly Journal for Physicians, the Journal of Danish Medical Association. The Danish language article provides one of the most sober discussions to date of the inherent medical and ethical uncertainties of providing minors with profound, life-altering interventions in the context of very limited understanding of the epidemiological shift in the population presenting for care, the growing rates of detransition, and the profound uncertainty about long-term outcomes. And there's just a couple. They hit on just a couple notes of why this is. And like I said, maybe another minute or less. Realizing that well-meaning intentions were based on insufficient evidence and seeing the growing evidence of harm, they sharply reversed course. Today, only 6% of the referrals are approved for hormonal transition, and no minors are allowed to transition surgically. The Danish Central, and these are just quick little notes from how they from the study. The Danish Centralized Pediatric Gender Service was launched in 2016. A key assumption now in question was the permanence of transgender identity in youth with long-standing gender dysphoria that intensified in puberty. The significant underexplained increase in referrals of adolescents over the age of 11, mainly made up of birth-assigned girls, became a major red flag. Birth-assigned girls aged 11 to 18 make up 70%, noting the excess of birth-assigned girls among gender dysphoric youth. The authors expressed concern that the background for the change is under-explained. Two more points. The authors call out more generally the growing rates of gender nonconformity in youth, and especially females, independent of youth wish to medicalize. The Danish clinicians are concerned by growing rates of detransitioning among those who initiated transition in youth and lack of research into detransition phenomenon. Two more. International change, and especially those in Nordic European countries, have directly influenced Denmark's move to a more cautious approach. In Finland and Sweden, youth with post-puberty onset of gender dysphoria are not typically considered to be candidates for medical transition in adolescence. Denmark's gender clinicians quoted these changes in their new move to base treatment eligibility in part on the duration of gender dysphoria. As a result of the above-mentioned concerns and international changes, Denmark has sharply restricted eligibility of hormone intervention of youth and surgical intervention. And so this is, my take is, like, in the U.S. medical system, you have it's a capitalistic system, right? It brought us the opioid epidemic. It brought us, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of kills by the opioid epidemic. And so, I would ask you, why would I trust a system that brought us the opioid epidemic, which killed hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, over three majorly progressive European countries?
We're not going to go down that route because the opioid epidemic has nothing to do with how good the U.S. medical data is. Also, the U.S. is treating like millions and millions of more people than are in Denmark. So there's a completely different responsibility for organizations that are representing those people.
Also, a lot of people who died during the opioid epidemic died because their care was discontinued and they had to start finding street drugs in order to treat their pain, and they died from overdose because it wasn't being overseen by a medical professional. Ask me how I know.
Yeah, but they're the ones who got it started.
Those are also two. Well, okay, so they were given medication to treat something like. Okay, I actually know somebody who was denied opioids after having her breasts removed for cancer because of this fear of her becoming addicted to medicine. So, like, we're giving people medication and then taking it away from them, and then they're seeking it from elsewhere, like, in the sense that their care wasn't, like, slowly tapered down as it's supposed to be, or they weren't transitioned onto a different, less addictive medicine. So, but that's completely unrelated. Basically, you're just saying, like, because we messed up this one thing for complex reasons that I clearly don't understand, that means that this completely separate issue is also bad. Like, like the doctors who are prescribing these medications are different doctors. Like the organizations that tell us what is good care are different in some cases. And like we have the like American Psychiatric Association, or is it the American Psychological Association? One of them is bad, and I can't remember which one.
Sure.
Yeah, like one of them is like it named itself that specifically to muddy the waters, but like they don't have anything to do with opioids, and they say that trans care is overwhelmingly effective.
Yeah, I also want to point out that, Jacob, you said they lied when that's not what happened. These doctors were giving medicine that is effective at doing what they wanted it to do, but the developers of the medication, and often in many cases, misled the doctors as to the addictive risks of these medications. So it wasn't like medical professionals were lying to the public to scam them onto meds. A lot of these doctors were just as duped as the patients were.
There's been reports have been coming out that it was well known in the community of doctors that this was not true, that it was not less addictive.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to bring facts for that one. But hold on, we're not going to get down to opioid thing because it's completely unrelated to the thing that we're. So first of all, I want to point out that, as I said to you last night on the show, this isn't a study or a review of the data on gender affirming care. This is a Danish medical journal talking about the policies that are going forward in Denmark for treating youth with gender affirming care, which is that they're only doing it in experimental settings because they hear the number 8,000% increase, which we've already addressed on this show. An 8,000% increase may or may not be a problem, because if you're having 8,000% increase from 8, that is not remarkable. That could be deviating towards the norm for that population.
And that's just referrals.
Right, and those were also just referrals. The thing that you read also admitted that those were just referrals. That wasn't necessarily the amount of people who were receiving care. Also, I want to point out that it said it was in favor of a cautious, developmentally appropriate approach, which is already what is done in the US. In the US, we already start with minors with social transition. The first thing that we do is give them therapy and say, all right, we're going to work this out in therapy. And in the meantime, if you want to cut your hair and change your name, you can do that, because there is literally no harm to you cutting your hair and changing your name. And then after that has been established for a certain amount of time, according to medical guidelines, then they can access puberty blockers. We already talked earlier today on this very show also about puberty blockers and how those are only given within a certain parameter of time frame, because after that certain time frame, you either need to resume your endogenous puberty or get on exogenous hormones, because that's where risk factors start to pop up. Like, the cautious approach is already what is being used in the US with minors. There's nothing that is new or interesting about this study that changes anything about how the American healthcare system approaches gender affirming care for youth.
So you would adopt this model?
No, because this one is saying also that I know in Denmark, they're only giving gender affirming care to youth in an experimental condition, but they didn't actually give a reason for why they're doing that. They're just saying, oh, the numbers are changing and we're scared. But the numbers are changing is not a reason
to reasons.
No, Jacob. The numbers changing the numbers changing alone is not a reason to be scared or to reduce care. You actually have to demonstrate that the medicine is either not effective or that there's some sort of harm going on. But what does the evidence that we have right now say? Well, it may not be satisfactory to every single individual like you. The research overwhelmingly shows right now that gender affirming care improves people's quality of life, reduces negative mental health outcomes like suicidality and depression and anxiety to be more in line with their cisgender peers. This medicine is effective, and when following the right guidelines, it is shown to improve people's quality of life. So I wouldn't advocate for adopting their exact guidelines. I would say that we already have cautiously developmentally appropriate guidelines for giving gender affirming care to minors.
Let me read you one of the reasons. According to the authors, the Dutch trials of gender transitions were justified insofar as it was believed that a cross-sex identity in adolescents with long-standing gender dysphoria that intensified in adolescence would be permanent or stable. However, the authors now concede that there are significant questions brought about the growing rate of detransition and concerns
Except that's
about the
complete
general.
bullshit. The rate of detransition, we have good studies on this. We have studies that have massive populations in them, one of whom, a host on this very show, was a part of putting together the study that got one of those data points. That show that the rate of detransition is extremely low when compared to many other non-controversial medical health outcomes. But I don't see you showing up here to contest the use of robot-assisted prostatectomies. I don't see you showing up here to contest the use of knee replacements or hip replacements because those have high regret rates. No, you're here talking about trans stuff. And why is that, Jacob? When trans regret rates are like on the generous side, 3% of people who receive trans healthcare, but most studies are actually looking at numbers that are closer to like 1% or lower.
The last study I looked at was 16% very dissatisfied, 14% dissatisfied.
I would love to see that
30%.
study because I've seen meta-analyses that say that say what I said. We're talking at like generously 3% are having authentic regret. There are people who detransitioned because they experienced like harassment and abuse from their community, their workplace, their employer, their religious leaders, their family. But that has nothing to do with whether or not being trans was authentically who they were or whether gender affirming care was the right decision for them. That had to do with their communities being fucking awful and bigoted towards them and doubting who they were.
So if you Google just satisfaction of gender of gender care transitioning, it's like the second listing on Google that talks about the 16%.
Google what?
Very dissatisfied. If you just Google satisfaction of gender care or satisfaction of gender transitions, you'll see that the second listing on Google is shows the study that shows 16.3% very dissatisfied, like 14% dissatisfied. And I would argue that they're ostracized. They get death threats. So and
yeah, it's
people who
almost like being
don't-
satisfied has nothing to do with the efficacy of the care, but has to do with how bigoted people are to them. And so restricting care, and so restricting gender affirming care would actually not improve these rates at all. What would improve these rates is teaching people that trans people are normal and that they're not going into bathrooms to sexually assault your daughter or entering sports competitions because they want to eliminate the value of women's sports, but rather because they're just trying to participate in fucking society like everyone else.
I live in rural America, and I've got a non-binary child, and she's got trans friends, and none of them have experienced any kind of bigotry towards them.
Yeah, the new generation is way better off, but most transgender people right now who are like existing in society, actually the same study that I referenced earlier that showed a really small regret rate that one of our hosts here participated in also has data about this, where they talked about like the kinds of discrimination that trans people face, and like the vast majority of trans people today would cite that they have been discriminated against or harassed or had people be like cruel to them for whatever reason or for whatever in whatever context because of their trans identity. Because your child who's in the younger generation where people have not had the opportunity to become completely indoctrinated into bigotry yet, hasn't experienced bigotry, which by the way, stoked for your kid. That's great. I hope they never have to experience that. But the fact is, trans people overwhelmingly in society are still facing bigotry like every day of our lives.
I'd like to give you another reason they cite. Another reason they cite is for the remaining few cases that will qualify for transition, significant uncertainties are explicitly identified. Irreversible changes are called out, along with the health risks. Both types of sex hormones cause reduced fertility. However, the degree and reversibility of this remains unknown. Contradictions in hormone therapy are abuse, suicidal ideation, self-harm, severe psychological distress, worrisome somatic condition, e.g. cancer, thromboembolic disease. It is an acknowledgement that hormone treatment will be lifelong. And, the question still remains in my head, why would I trust the capitalistic medical system over these systems in Europe that are not capitalistic? They're run by the state. And
I have a better question for you, Jacob. I'm gonna come in here. Why would I trust a system that allows for freedom of choice more than I trust a system with a national healthcare system where they want to spend as little money as possible because it's a unified healthcare system. Like, why are we trusting like this other country which has decided like, oh, we are going to draconically decide who gets access to medical care that for cisgender people is basic. This is just de facto, this care is de facto given to cisgender patients. Like precocious puberty, you get puberty blockers de facto. If you have low testosterone, de facto. If you are a woman who's growing a mustache, boom, you get estrogen de facto. We are putting, like, these countries are putting extra gatekeeping behind this care that is considered normal for cis people versus in the US, where we prioritize freedom of choice, being able to choose your doctor, being able to choose what care you get, going off of like the medically supported guidelines, which again, it's also like the World Health Organization is a global organization which supports trans access to healthcare. So like, why are you
for minors?
like,
Yes.
yeah, for minors.
I also want to point out that what you're bringing up, Jacob, they didn't once say, we have data that shows that transition is bad for kids. We have data that shows that it has these negative outcomes. No. What they said was there could be these problems. We don't have enough research about how to deal with problem X, Y, and Z. So therefore, we're going to not allow them to access the medicine that we know improves their quality of life, that we know reduces suicidal ideation and depression, because there could be some sort of negative side effect. Jacob, if we equitably applied that principle to every medical condition where there was some risk because we didn't know every possible problem that could arise with it, we would be banning massive amounts of modern medicine. Do you know how much of modern medicine ends up being off-label use because we have just found that, oh, this is really effective for this population. This population reports positive interaction with this medication, because conducting ethical studies with like double-blind placebo trials is extremely difficult to do and expensive. And so it's easier to just acknowledge this group of people as showing these positive trends when we give them this sort of medication. So we're just going to allow them to engage in that off-label use because there has been no demonstration of risk and there is demonstration of a benefit.
Oh, that's exactly what they're saying. I mean,
no, it's not. I literally just pointed out the problem with what they're saying.
Well, my understanding is looking at this is where they're getting their information from, is from the data for after transitioning.
No, your understanding is wrong. They literally did not say, no, your understanding is wrong. They literally did not say there's evidence of harm. This is a problem. What you just read out to us said we don't have enough information on the potential risks for X. We don't have enough information about the harms for Y, so we're going to restrict the care, even though every other major medical health organization endorses this care and knows about the benefits of it. They're saying that in spite of the benefits, there could be risks, therefore we're pulling it back.
Okay.
Your understanding is wrong.
Okay. Well, regardless, you have, let's see here, 4 European countries now on this standard.
Okay, no, Jacob, we're going to stop you because this is the second time this has happened, and this is what got me fed up with the call with the previous caller who was arguing for the same shit you were, where we point out why your case isn't being made, and rather than going, wow, you know what? You're right, I'm not making my case with that. I'm going to go back and research more. You go, okay, well, here's my other talking point. I don't need your other talking point. You failed to make your case. Jacob, stop. Jacob, stop. Jacob, stop. You failed to make your case. Go back, do more research, call back in with a better case. You didn't do it here. I'm not going to let you just pivot and pull the next topic out of your ass because you failed on this one. That's creationist bullshit, and I'm not having it today. So thank you for calling. You can give a last word, unless you try to pull some bullshit like the other guy did, then I'm just going to drop you.
All I did was say that there's 4 countries on brand with exactly what we're talking about. I just said that
I don't care. It's a different topic, and since you're not using your time, that's not my problem. Goodbye, Jacob. Just a note for callers. This is the thing I hate about creationist callers, is when they'll be like, well, everything has a cause, and so the universe must have a cause. And you can say, well, we actually don't know what caused the universe, so So I don't think we can just jump to saying it's creator. We don't know why the universe started, or this like instantiation of the universe. And they'll say, okay, well, the universe seems designed. Like, oh, you failed, so you're just going to pivot to a completely different topic. Like,
Yep.
oh yeah, well, other countries think so too. I don't give a fuck. You came to make a case, you failed to do so. I'm not just going to let you pivot to the next topic that you have up your ass. Honestly, I'm glad your kid doesn't experience bigotry, but I don't know if I believe you, because you seem bigoted, Jacob. And I kind of feel bad knowing that you have a trans kid in your care and that you think the way you do. I don't trust that they haven't experienced bigotry. I think they probably get it from you. And one day when they're resentful towards you, I hope you'll remember this call. All
Super
right.
chats of $5 or more. We'll read them out. Vote for Arden. Vote for Lux.
All right. Coming up next, we're going to have 2 calls on this topic today. So maybe if Lee at the end doesn't want to after hearing this topic, that would be acceptable. But if it goes a
We
different
address the
direction,
point.
that's cool too. Yeah, so we're going to talk to Louise from UK, pronouns are she, her, who wants to talk about self-ID and does it do more harm than good. Louise, you are live on Transatlantic. Go for it.
Hi there. Yeah, I've had a very, very long history with the trans community since transitioning back in 1999. We fought a very long, hard campaign in the UK, which eventually wound up with the Gender Recognition Act back in 2005, which gave us the ability to be recognised as destination gender after a medical process which was at the time defined by the Benjamin Standards of Care and involved a sort of 2-year process, which did include surgery. In the time since then, things seem to be getting better for quite a while until we actually got to self-ID. At that point, we've had a shift from the slow march of acceptance of trans people and the development and enlargement of availability of trans care, and the political shift that has occurred when self-ID came along has, frankly, it's left me scared to actually be open about who I am in my fairly conservative community. From being several years ago one of the first openly trans leaders of one of our local political parties. My point, the topic is, has the sort of rush to self-ID and the speed at which recognition has been demanded actually set back the cause of acceptance rather than promoted it?
I feel like this has relatively little to do with like self-ID itself and more to do with the like conservative backlash. You know, like if they had thought that it was going to win them political points 10 years ago, they probably would have started attacking trans people 10 years ago, which, I mean, to be fair, I guess 2016 was when we kind of started to see this increase of like anti-trans rhetoric going on. I mean, the problem is that both of our countries are sliding toward fascism and they're using trans people as the scapegoat group to justify consolidating power. And it's like trans people wanting recognition. And I guess I don't know, like self-ID for you all, like, is that just like you get to change your passport without having like a cisgender person say, yes, you've been on hormones for long enough? Because like you still have to have bottom surgery in order to get your gender recognition certificate for the birth certificate and all that stuff to be changed, right? So it's like, and like, how much does self-ID actually impact your access to spaces? Like, this is an argument that I have with UK TERFs a lot of the time is, oh, well, if you could just self-ID, you can use whatever bathroom. It's like, everybody can already use whatever bathroom. You don't need a GRC in order to use the bathroom. You don't have to be on hormones for a certain period of time and then somebody tells you you're allowed to use the female bathroom. So I think it's just like misplacing the blame to think that self-ID is like the cause of regressive bigotry, where like it is much more obvious that, yeah, like they just need someone to put in this position. Like in my country, it was immigrants for a really long time. And I know that you all have an issue with that as well, where it's like, oh, all these immigrants coming in, messing things up and everything. Like they've just shifted to a different scapegoat group gradually.
Yeah, I think it's like the old joke when you're taking a college level like a behavioral stats course will be like, as ice cream sales went up, drownings went up. So ice cream sales caused drownings, and it's like, nope, that's because as summer happened, people ate more ice cream, and as summer happened, people swam more, so people drowned more. Like correlation does not equal causation. I also think it's interesting that you talked about the Gender Recognition Act was put in, after this medical process, Louise. But let's acknowledge that that medical process is started by what? Self-ID. It started by you recognizing in yourself that you think you're a trans person, going to a medical professional and saying, I think I'm a trans person, and starting that path. It's the same thing. Just because you have a piece of paper doesn't mean you're legit.
Oh, we don't disagree on that at all. But it has literally been strengthened savagery, the backlash. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned immigrants. Yeah, where I live, we have got a massive problem with immigration, which is that prior to the backlash with immigration, all our crops got picked, and now that we've actually kicked out all the transient workers who used to roam around Europe doing harvesting, we've had crops rotting in the fields, and the farmers can't get people to work for them. So that's caused some problems around here as well. Anyhow, yeah. Thank you. We can just kind of leave it there. But congratulations, you're the first two trans people I have knowingly talked to in years now. Because around here, it is such that I've had people follow me around and trying to intimidate me just on my other political stances.
I would recommend, Louise, that you look for trans community in your local area, because it sounds like maybe you bought into some of the anti-trans propaganda, which if you're not in community with trans people, it makes sense why it can be easy to buy a snappy statement that sounds really good on its surface. So I appreciate you calling in, Louise, but I really don't think self-ID is the problem here.
I agree. It's always conservative backlash, but it's just a matter of whether we push too far too fast and sparked it. But we'll never know on that one.
I think we should push them as hard as we possibly can for as long as we possibly can. And if they cry, I will drag them along kicking and screaming.
Good for you. Good for you.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Louise. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that was quick and easy.
Call quality on that one was very difficult for me.
Yeah.
Audio processing disorder.
Yeah, it is a little hard to follow what she was saying amidst all of that. Okay, I did want to take everyone in order. There's not a huge difference between Leon and Lee, and I think Lee is related to the last conversation, so let's bring Lee in to talk about self-ID, and then we'll finish up with Leon. So hang on tight, we'll be getting to you. Up next is Lee, calling in from New York, also wants to talk about self-ID. So, Lee, what did we not get to in the last call that you need us to address?
Yeah, I think I just wasn't getting my idea across well, or I, hadn't thought about it as much. But when I called earlier, the problem that I saw with it was that if self-ID, the only condition is what one identifies, then whether or not someone's being honest, you have to accept that is equally valid in all cases, because that's the only condition by which someone identifies as. But I think actually the deeper problem is that it's one way to be a certain way, and it's another thing to identify a certain way. Like, I don't think that you can necessarily be anything simply by identifying as it. There has to be some external factors that play into that, or I guess just to get clear on a definition. So like if someone said they're a woman, I mean, you either have to have a definition of that in and of itself, and then there's certain features about that word that this person would have to satisfy, other than self-IDing as it, because that doesn't necessarily mean that they have these features. Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, it's a complex gender theory thing. Like Judith Butler has written about this, that like there is the thing that you are internally, and this is partially a failure of the English language too, that we use the word gender to mean like 8 different things.
Yeah.
So it's like the thing that you identify as, and also the clothes that you wear, and also the body parts that you have, and also the social role and whether people bestow it on you. Great Philosophy Tube video talks about like, you know, do you acquire womanhood by like personal actions, or is it like a thing that's bestowed upon you by the community? Like, what is cool? What is it to be cool? You know, what if the anime club thinks you're cool, but the Quidditch club doesn't? Like, you know, is gender something that is conferred upon you by the community, or is it just the thing that you identify as? And the answer is like, it depends, because the word gender has different contexts. Like in German, you could say the word economics a million times, and like they have a bunch of nuanced words for all the different kinds of economics, but we just have the one word. So we would just say the word economics over and over again, but they would create like a sentence that makes sense. It's the same with gender. Like we just say gender over and over again, and we mean like 8 different things. And I guess the question is like, where is the problem? Like what are some issues? Like where do you think self-ID creates like a problem, where someone personally identifying with a gender, they haven't done any of the other steps yet? Okay, what's the problem?
Because then you can't just have features by simply identifying that you have them if that's the only condition. Like,
but we've already determined that like a gender, we could say that a gender is the psychological state of being, and also gender is how you present your body and things like this. So like you can be a woman in your internal gender and yet like not perfectly fulfilling a societal expectation of what a woman is. And this goes for cisgender women too. There are cis women with short hair who've had their breasts removed because of mastectomy. Like maybe they had BRCA2, so they also had ovarian cancer, and they've had everything removed, and they basically functionally look like men, and they don't fulfill like the sexual role of females anymore. So like, you know, why is it a problem that like a person can say I identify as a woman when they haven't yet taken the steps to like transition?
Well, because I mean, it depends on what you mean by woman. That's what we need to get to, you know, like.
Sure. Yeah, like are we talking about woman the social role? Are we talking about woman the psychological state of being? Like, also where does this distinction matter?
Well, I think it matters. Like, if you're going to grant access to women's only spaces for someone,
everybody has been able to use whatever bathroom they want for longer than both of us have been alive combined. This is a very recent problem that conservatives are inventing. People basically just like use the bathroom and then go home, you know? And you don't have to be any particular thing.
What about like locker rooms? Do you think that like a clearly presenting as heterosexual male should be able to go change in the girls' locker room at school?
Do you think that a lesbian should be able to dress in the women's bathroom, in the women's locker room? Do you think that like a lesbian should be able to do that? Do you think that gay men should be able to use the men's? Okay, so why is it a problem for trans people if they're just using the space?
I didn't say trans people, like all encompassing trans people. I'm saying like certain types of presentations, gender presentations.
Okay, so the problem that I have, Lee,
like someone who's
is like, listen, we could create these niche scenarios that never happen, that are purely fabricated for the purpose of casting doubt on trans identities and the legitimacy of our access to space. But the fact is, like Luxander pointed out, this has always been self-ID anyway. You have to take people's word on everything that they say about themselves necessarily. You have no access to people's internal state to know whether they're being honest about anything they say about themselves. And until there is a demonstration of an actual problem, I don't give a fuck about these fictional made-up scenarios of a bearded man with a raging boner entering the women's locker room to spy on people, because it's not a thing that's happening. Like, it's just a
realistically
fictional
trans
story
people
that's
don't
created.
do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying people that are genuinely trying to live their life as, you know, an opposite sex that they were born as. But I mean,
and it's not
but I'm
creating
talking about,
space
like,
for
places-
people who aren't to do it either, is what I'm saying. Like, this is a fictional
How is
thing
it
that's
not,
made
though?
up to cast out on trans people.
So if someone self-ID'd as a woman and you were suspicious of their integrity, you wouldn't have a problem with that if they were just doing it to try to gain access to women's spaces, not to assault anyone or to do anything.
I might be
harassing, but just
suspicious
to
of
go
their
into that space.
integrity, but my suspicion of someone's integrity should have no bearing on their right to free access and participation in society.
And part of the reason why I brought up the fact that this has been the case for longer than both of us have been alive is that, like, self-ID has always been the rule. That has always been the case until these laws started to pass in, like, 2016, restricting bathroom access. So at any point, 15, 20 years ago, at any point, somebody could just say, I identify as a woman and I want to use the women's bathroom. And it's not happening. So what you're doing here is you're, like, hand-wringing over, like, oh, what if? And it's like, it would have happened already if it was going to happen.
I mean, I wasn't even really thinking about, I don't personally care that much about bathrooms. I was talking about, like, sports, for example.
Well, sex
I feel like
segregated
there's a
spaces.
problem there with, yeah, sex segregated.
And that's a different topic too. Like, so that's actually our next caller is sports.
Yeah, let's not go down the sports line. Let's stay on sex segregated spaces.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if
You
someone's
said
going to
locker
want to gain
rooms.
access to us, yeah, I just feel like in that scenario, like in a high school scenario, that's more problematic than a bathroom scenario. Like,
so you think?
But again, that has
where
always
people are
been the
actually
case.
changing
Like,
and-
there's nobody checking IDs. There's nobody, like, policing this. It has always been the case. You can just walk in. There's not a lock on the door. You don't have to scan your ID in order to get in. Like, if people were going to enter these spaces in order to, I don't know, in order to do nothing, apparently, according to how you're framing this, like, you're not worried about assault. You're just worrying about people being present in the locker room. Like, that would have already started to happen. Like, that would have already happened.
But if it did happen, do you think it would be problematic?
Why would it be problematic for a person to be in a locker room? If we're assuming there's no assault, what is the problem? Because that's why I asked
It
you if
makes
it's
other
okay for
people
lesbians
uncomfortable.
to be in. So is it okay for an out lesbian to be in the women's bathroom or the women's locker room? Because
Yes.
this is the same recycled argument that has been used against gay people. Like,
And
I don't know
racists
how
don't
old you
like
are,
black
Lee.
people in their spaces. Like, so what?
It's,
I don't
oh my
care
God,
who's uncomfortable.
makes me uncomfortable. This sexually predatory black person is near me in a locker room. Like, we've been seeing these arguments for forever. It's not new. We're just applying it to
I mean,
a new
if-
group of people.
If the people that you're talking about's feelings, you know, if you want to just disregard them, I mean, couldn't you make the same argument for a trans
that's
person
really
or someone
cute, Lee.
identifying?
That's really cute, Lee. I like how you're like, oh, you're just disregarding their feelings. Yes, I'm happy to disregard the feelings of people who make bigoted assumptions of, like, sexual predation onto an entire population of people based on fictional scenarios. That's why I brought up the race thing, because I don't give a fuck if racists are uncomfortable with people of color in the bathroom. Because who gives a shit what racists think? I don't give a shit what bigots think about trans people being in the bathroom, because trans people aren't doing anything wrong. Why should I give a shit what bigots think when they're basing it on a fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the racist thing, obviously.
But you don't agree with us that people who are just, like, transphobic fundamentally.
And it's the same exact logic.
it's the
So if
same
you
thing.
agree on the race thing, you should agree on this problem for the exact same logic.
It's not the same logic. Like,
It is the
we're
same
still-
logic,
like,
though.
The race problem is that you're saying
Because
that
I'm
there's differences in
uncomfortable.
humans based on their skin color.
Yes.
Yeah, like,
because
so because you look like
Okay.
you're not gender conforming, I'm uncomfortable, and therefore I'm going to make it your problem.
I mean, I really didn't even want to focus on the bathroom things. I was more so going towards sports or prisons.
Okay, you know, Lee, I have to pause you for a second, and I have to do a rant towards you in the audience. I'm going to make an example out of you, okay? I don't care if you call in, and then you say something, and we hone in on it, and you say, that's not what I wanted to talk about. Because the whole point of these conversations is to get into the legitimacy of the claims that you're making. So if you make a claim like, oh, like, well, what if the people in this bathroom are made uncomfortable by their presence? And we say, well, why should we care if they are uncomfortable? I don't care if that's not your topic. You said it, so we're talking about it, right? That's the whole point of these shows, applying skepticism to the issue of gender and trans issues.
Yeah, and I said that I think those people's feelings are just as valid as the trans person who.
So you
doesn't
think
wanna
the
go into the
racist
bathroom
people's
with their
feelings
stick.
are valid too?
No, that's the conflation. It's not the same thing.
No, but it is the same thing though, because
Well,
they're both
it's not the same thing. Last time
they're both using a fictional thing informed by their bigotry to cast judgments on a person who is just present in the room next to them. It's the same thing, Lee.
Well, you're using race when it's convenient for you, because the last time I called in and I said, why could someone change their gender but not their race? And
Oh,
then you went on
okay.
this tirade about that, but now
So you're a fan of fictional bullshit arguments, is what you're saying. You really like the whole jacking off JAQ. I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions.
I mean, I don't know where you're going with that, but
cool. Lee, I don't give a shit to talk to you. If you're gonna not agree to the same logical principle, and you're going to be like, oh, you only use race when it's convenient for you because I brought up racial identities and you didn't accept it. Yeah, you're just a jack off kind of guy, and I really don't give a fuck to talk to you. So bye. Suck on rocks, you fart bag.
Great. I love that.
All right.
Oh,
One more
good
caller
gracious.
left today. Are you ready?
Yeah. We're getting close to the end, so get your super chats in. Come on,
That's
y'all.
right.
Arden's had a lot of spicy calls. I'm like, I would vote hashtag Team Arden if it was me in the chat today.
Every time I come on the show, I'm like, I'm going to be more patient and measured. And then they say some bullshit.
Like,
and I'm like,
mad.
I'm so fucking done. All right. Leon in Iceland, pronouns are he, him, wants our opinion on sports. Leon, you are live.
Hello. Hello. Can you hear me?
We got you.
Yeah.
Awesome. First of all,
Leon, I'm sorry to cut you off. Your mic is coming in really
Yeah.
hot. Could you like back a little bit away from your speaker
Oh,
or whatever your
sorry,
mic
sorry,
is, or
sorry.
talk a
Yeah,
little
okay,
softer
what about-
even.
Okay, I'll just talk a little softer. Is this okay?
Much better. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Sorry
No
about
worries.
this. Yeah. Well, on the topic of mics, I've been in this call now for about an hour, and I also have the live stream open. And not only is there a lag, a little delay, but there's also, you guys sound so much better on the live stream than in the call.
Oh, yeah.
Call quality is no good.
Yeah, so I wanted to say, first of all, I'm not a bigot, so I hope that's okay. I mean, I know it's okay. You guys been talking to allies, right? Yeah.
Yep.
I know the title is like super spicy, and honestly, it's boring. But when I wrote the title, I honestly just wanted your opinions on that one specific topic. But throughout the call, I've been writing down notes. I got like about 17 of them.
Wow.
And then I learned on the last one. And I'm like, I hope you guys will take time for me.
We got plenty of time for you. So how do you want us to go at this? Talking about trans people in sports.
Well, yeah, like I said, I kind of deviated away from that. But we can start with that. My genuine question is, and I hope you guys need, in case you guys need a little context, I'm from Iceland. From Iceland, it is the most progressive country on the planet. You may or may not know that. In terms of like anything from women's rights to gay rights to trans rights to female presidents, lesbian prime ministers, etc., etc., etc. I'm about as boring as it gets, though, being a hetero cis white male. Anyway, that is context over. Cool. So I have a genuine question. What do you guys think about sports? And I mean that in the terms of like, there are these people going about whining about, these male to female or female to male. Honestly, it's always male to female that they whine the most about. They're bodying this player in whatever sport it is. It's so unfair, and it's so. I'm honestly thinking, well, first of all, they wouldn't give a shit about that unless, if the whole trans aspect wasn't a thing. These people don't give a shit about women's sports or women's safe spaces until trans people start to be more, visible.
Yep. That's why I treated the last caller the way I did.
Exactly. Whoa, sorry, I'm also reading the chat here. Is my mic terrible? Somebody called it a potato. Oh.
It is
It's
still
a little bit
peaking
rough.
a little bit, but it's okay. We can understand you, and it's maybe a tiny bit better than it was when you started, so it's all right.
All right. Well, I know it's okay. I know it's good, actually. I think it's the connection. It has to be the connection.
It happens.
Anyway. Yeah, sorry about that. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to know your guys' opinions. Do you think about sports at all? Do you care? Do you think there should be a special league for male to female trans people? Or do you guys not like... I mean, is there even enough of trans athletes in any given sports to warrant such a league? I'm just wondering. That's like the original point I had. And no, before you say, why don't you ask your trans friends? Well, that's because they don't give a shit. They don't watch. Nobody watches sports here. I don't. Well, anyway. But yeah, so yeah, that's my genuine question to you. One of many, hopefully, to come.
Well, I definitely have thoughts, but I also have to pee. So, Lux, you want to take this one first, and I can step away?
I was going to say, we might have to trade that.
Right.
When you come back, and then I'll go. But yeah, I'll take this one to start with. Okay, so my general opinion on this. So first of all, there are not enough trans athletes, even like on either side. If you combined them, there wouldn't be enough trans athletes to like have even one team, much less like two teams that can play against each other. And like my view on this is that like, okay, we have not demonstrated that there is an advantage. Actually, the data most recently, the IOC commissioned a report on this, and it shows that trans women are disadvantaged in certain metrics. And that includes some of the metrics that people say are super important, like bone density and things like this. So we are not shown that there's an advantage. And then on top of that, you would need to prove to me that it is an unfair disadvantage. Like there are people with polycystic ovarian syndrome who have higher levels of testosterone during puberty, like females who have higher testosterone during puberty. Are they allowed to compete with women? Is that considered an advantage? Is that considered an unfair advantage? So I think that there is kind of a double standard where any trans woman's success in sports is like, oh my God, it's unfair. She's displacing a real woman from competing. And even if she loses, like even if trans women are losing, it's still, people get upset about it because, oh, the one who came in 7th place would have actually come in 6th place instead if there wasn't that trans person on the team. And like, yeah, so there's natural variation even among people assigned female at birth. Like Gwendolyn Christie, goddess among us, is she allowed to play sports because she's like 6'4" or something, she's like crazy tall. And therefore she has the same kind of advantage that people are saying trans women have, where it's like, oh my God, you're so much taller, you have a fundamental advantage or whatever. So my personal opinion on sports is that we should, if we're concerned, well, okay, so first of all, I think that sports should be desegregated because the simple fact that sports are segregated means that women perform worse. Like there's like psychological tests that go into this.
Absolutely. I mean, well,
yeah.
It's
basically like if you tell women that they're going to perform worse than they do, basically.
Right. Well, yeah, there are definitely some sports that I agree with should absolutely not be segregated by gender or sex. But I don't know. I haven't given this too much thought. So yeah, I couldn't really say.
And like my follow-up thought to that is that if we are concerned about physical advantages, then we should have height and weight competition. Like in wrestling,
right, yeah.
We have height and weight. So that would make more sense to me than segregating by gender.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, I see where you're coming from. That makes a lot of sense.
I don't know if
Yeah.
Arden, you want to hop in on that while I run to the bathroom?
Yep, sounds good. Hopefully I won't repeat too much of anything Luxander said, but I think an angle I've been taking at this lately has been also talking about like the kind of double standard that we have in like sexism in sports with regard to like it does seem to be the case that, you know, some trans women might have what could be considered an athletic advantage in some very specific contexts or something, right? But like, we don't hold when a cis man has some sort of biological deviation from the norm that gives him a massive advantage in a given sport. We don't ban that person from competition. We celebrate that person. We uplift that person. We're like, wow, how fortunate for Michael Phelps that he has his large, freaky fish arms, that he can be phenomenal in sport. We don't go, he has a biological advantage and shouldn't be allowed to compete. And to me, I feel like it just kind of demonstrates the sexism in sports, that if you are really good at sports, you're not really a woman, or you are some sex deviation and it's unfair for women to compete. But if you're a really skilled male competitor, you're just revered and propped up and celebrated for your skills. So it just feels to me like it's I don't know. I admittedly, I'm not interested in sports personally. I have only had to think deeply about this and come up with arguments because people ask this question all the time. But I personally have strong thoughts or feelings about sports. Like, you know, I don't care. But
in fact, I kind of feel like this is a very like, that's why I kind of said it was a kind of a boring title, a boring topic, because it's been talked about so much. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct that whenever somebody has something that birth defect or whatever that gives them an edge, we celebrate those people. We go, yes, thanks to this guy's phenomenal whatever. He set this new record. Yeah, I mean, and also I'm seeing a lot of good points here in the chat. This makes a lot of sense. We should be doing this, or like to make things fair, have things like in wrestling, do things like, you know, height and weight and everything else like that. And then when it comes to everything else, yeah, I mean, we shouldn't really, you raise a. I'm saying a lot of yes and no. I'm sorry. I'm kind of used to talking to a lot of people at once, but I'm still super nervous right now. I don't know why.
It's all right. Oh, it's a complex topic. I think there's a lot of nuance, and it's not like a clear yes or no answer. I think one thing that everyone I've talked to agrees on, even a lot of like bigots, is that unilaterally banning an entire group of people from competition is probably not the right move. I've gotten a lot of like explicitly anti-trans people to even agree, yeah, banning trans women across the board is actually probably not even the right move. There's probably a more balanced and nuanced approach that can consider potential advantages and potential disadvantages and things like Luxander was saying, like weight or height classes, things that might actually be more objectively relevant to performance in a given sport that would be more valuable to consider. But to me, it just seems like the fervor and fear around like the solution being ban trans women from competition, especially at like the high school and lower level, where, you know, what we're talking about is really an effort in community building and team building, like cooperation skills learning, and not so much like professional competition. I think it's even less of should be at least considered less of a concern than when we're talking about like maybe at the Olympic level, there might be warranted for more guidelines or something.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I'm strictly talking about like professional. That's where the whole issue is, having having mixed sexes in athletes as like kids, or you know, or in just like any kind of not like super serious high school or whatever. Yeah, that's an obvious answer. Of course, we shouldn't keep those segregated. I feel like.
I wish legislators in the U.S. agreed with you, Leon, because I agree that there's room for conversation at the professional level, but unfortunately, many legislators in the U.S. are trying to ban trans girls teenagers and literal children from competing in sports with their peers because
it's
that
also
child
such
had a penis when it was a baby, and so it's going to ruin that little girl's life.
It also comes. It really boils down to a deep-rooted misogyny, honestly. Because what was it? Shooting, I do believe, in Olympics, or was it golf? It was some sport or the other where they didn't have segregation, and they had tried this. What was it like? If I remember correctly, they tried this once. So like, oh, this is a new thing, like shooting, it's a new thing in the Olympics, it's non-segregated. A woman won, and the next year it was segregated. It's like,
yeah,
you have to keep up male supremacy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all due to like insecurity and ego, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not innocent of that either. I mean, I also deal with my own issues. But
and you know, the thing is about like, let's say that we create a women's category. Like, I agree that it, you know, regardless, I think you could say that it enables sexism. Let's say that women and men could theoretically compete at the same level in this group, but we want to create this women's category that only features women purely for representation so that little girls watching this can go, hey, that is a valid path for me. I can like look to developing my skills down that route. That is totally cool with me. Representation is great. But at that point, if we're only doing it for representation, there's no valid argument for excluding trans people at that point, and it's just starts to be ridiculous. Like, now we're just having like the inclusion category and not like the competitive category, right? And
yeah, that's just, you know, participation trophy and like or token category. Like, nobody wants that. Like, either you're playing for fun or you're playing to win. Well, in most cases, both.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to be like, yes, because I had a penis, or because I am blue-eyed, or because I'm any physical, any kind of whatever, English. Yeah, nobody wants to be like, because I am like this, I belong to this entire thing, and that's why I'm here. No, I want to be there because it's fun and because I'm good at it, you know? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Like I said, I had a bunch of other things I also wanted to mention, but I just hope you guys have the time for that.
Yeah.
Pick your favorite one.
Yeah, let's do one of your favorite ones, and then save the rest for another call.
Oh yeah, I absolutely will. I've only once called in before. Like, I've been a fan of you guys and this show and some hosts like Valkai, for example, and Dillahunty, and you guys as well. I've been a fan of you guys for a long time, and then this is kind of like meeting a mini celebrity. Yeah, I think that's why I'm kind of stressed. Anyway, so.
No worries.
Speaking of my favorite one,
real quick.
Suzazi. You know what? Okay, here's one. The bathrooms. The bathrooms. Let's talk about the bathrooms. That was a note that I wrote down when somebody was in a call. Is this the age of old question? Should we allow trans people in their gendered bathroom? And, you know, well, there could be up to something. There could be up to, like, I mean, depending on your definition of bathroom, they're either there to change into other type of clothing, be it swimsuit or swimwear, or they're there to take a shit. Nobody gives a damn what, you know. Like, over here, it's really not much of an issue. Like, I mean, yeah, we have gendered bathrooms, but like, nobody's gonna bat an eye if you walk in or come out of quote unquote the wrong bathroom. Like, that's just not really a big thing here. We're kind of well, without tooting my own horn too much, we are kind of very open about gender, sexuality, sex, religion, well, secularism, rather. Yeah, we're very secular. And a lot of the topics you guys are talking about, like, and just in general over the pond in America, it's such a no-brainer to a lot of us over here. It's just like, oh, there is no, like, oh, is this right? Is this wrong? Whatever. No, it's called just common fucking decency. It's called being a human and respecting each other. I don't understand.
It's amazing how when you deconstruct from these socially conservative religious points of views, even if you don't hold to the religious belief itself, how obvious some of the solutions become, how obvious some of the problems that we've been talking about, how obviously fraudulent those problems are. But unfortunately, even in like the atheist, quote unquote skeptic community, there are still a lot of people who they deconstructed their belief in God, but they did not deconstruct like socially conservative religious values, and so they still are hung up on some like really elementary level problems that have really obvious solutions. And when they point it out to them, like that last guy, he's like, it can't be that I'm wrong both of these times. You must just be weaponizing race when it fits your argument. Like,
right.
It's a complete shutdown of the brain.
Yeah. Like, nobody wants their beliefs questioned, but like in science and opinions and beliefs and any kind of worldview, it's not healthy, I'd say, to constantly question yourself. However, confidence does not equal like total 100% assuredness. So, like, if somebody brings up a point, you could dismiss it, but alternatively, you could also go, maybe there's something to that. Let me at least think about it for 5 minutes. Like, I don't know. Oh shit, no, there is another topic that I wanted to talk more about. Dang it, no, I picked the wrong one. It's gonna be a lengthy one anyway. I'll wait for it.
Yeah, let's wait for the next time, Leon. Yeah.
All right. You guys are awesome. I was trying to have a conversation in the side chat, but like there's a timer. What is it called?
Yeah, we have to do that to make sure we don't get flooded by like bots and groups who are troll bots. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for calling, Leon. We appreciate you waiting all that time to talk to us, and thank you for the conversation. We appreciate it.
Thank you guys. Absolutely. You guys are amazing. Much love from Iceland.
All right. See you later, Leon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.
All righty.
Wow, it was some doozies today. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, my God. Okay, we are going to move on to our super chats. We'll read any super chat of $5 or more, and if you add hashtag Team Arden or hashtag Team Luxander to it, you get 1 point for that team. Whoever has the least points at the end of super chats will have to defend. Oh, I actually have to put up that poll.
Yeah, I was going to say, which one are we doing?
Let's
y'all have to vote.
Normally I try to get that rolling so we know by the time we're starting the super chats, but
it's hard when you're hosting at the same time.
It's hard when I'm hosting at the same time, and the format's a little bit new, so they're not quite like muscle memory the way most of the other shows are for me, where I'm like, I don't even really think about what I'm doing. I just like boop boop beep. It's this part of the show, All right, so I do have the things already selected though. The loser defend. All right, our options are going to be coming at you at the poll. First, garden gnomes are the best birthday gift. Position number 2 to defend. It's hard to be a cishet white man. And
hard.
Option number 3 to defend is sandals should only be worn with socks, or socks should only be worn with sandals. Maybe it should be how that's phrased.
Like, sandals should only be worn with socks. Like
yeah, okay.
Yeah. You should only ever put socks on with sandals.
So that poll is hitting the chat. So whoever you want to lose is going to defend the position you vote for in this poll in chat. So go vote there, and we will dive into our super chats. You want to go first?
Yeah. $10. Thank you so much. Skeptoidius says, Hello to the line's most famous supermodel and sometimes reptile whisperer, Arden Hart, and the supreme overcommander of the Dragon Horde, Luxander. It's true.
Wow, your
I
name
got
is way
dragon wings on my
cooler.
chair. I think that your name is pretty cool, but shrug.
Supreme
Everybody's like,
Overcommander.
you have curly hair, you wish you had short or straight hair. You have straight hair, you wish you had curly hair. That's how it goes.
Yep. Thank you, Skeptoidius. We've got $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Can we all just say we're trans, like a bunch of Spartacus? We're all transicus, or maybe not, but it's more ridiculous than the times. It's not more ridiculous than the times. Yeah, honestly, I kind of think it'd be funny if a bunch of people started doing that, just to point out, like, literally nothing would change about society if everyone just decided they were trans all of a sudden. Conservatives would be having a panic about it, but literally nothing would change. Oops. We get our scoreboard.
Cringe. $5 from Larry Fishman. Thank you. Says, my older brother FTM came out about 6 years before I, MTF, did. I was questioning the whole time, but afraid to ask the right questions. Yeah, that is the tough thing too. Even if you know somebody, like your partner could come out as trans, and maybe you do feel like you might have some of those same questions, but it's like hard to bring up, and you don't want to steal the other person's thunder or seem like you're copying, or you don't know what the right questions are. So yeah, it's challenging.
Honestly, that makes me think of the call we had earlier about the sibling who came out, and I'm sure that's what this was based on. But I've often wondered if that's the reason. My siblings never told me that, but why they came out so much longer after I came out, because it might have been like, oh, well, my experience wasn't like Arden's, and I don't want to steal her thunder or whatever, It's weird because we're close and we do talk about this stuff, but that's never come up. So 653 from Jason Jones, hashtag Team Arden. How are the hognoses coming along? Hi Lux. Also, Jimmy, go fuck yourself. My geese are awesome, so take a weird coded money amount. Hognoses are doing all right. We are still like probably several years from breeding. Although one of our adult females laid a bunch of duds just like a month ago. A whole clutch of dead eggs. And so we were surprised. I gave her like 2 rats that week, or 2 mice that were coated in calcium powder to get back some of those nutrients. But I think that means she's ready to go. So hopefully next year we'll have some babies. Our first clutch. We'll see.
Extra protein, dead eggs.
Yeah.
5 pounds. Thank you so much. Sean Isherwood says, having experimented with my gender and largely decided I'm cis, I would have benefited vastly on a personal level with doing so at a younger age. Yeah. Imagine doing this like when you're in college or something and not like already established in your career. Crazy.
Yeah. And Sean has told their story before. I believe he had a sincere effort to transition MTF and was like identifying that way for quite a while before he realized that it didn't fit for him. So with all the, fear mongering about regret rates, here's an example of someone who does not fit your bullshit.
That's wild.
$10 from Mo Scoville. Hey, Mo. One thing I'm sure of is I'm genuinely happy to catch the live show again. Always a great watch. Hashtag Team Arden. I love you, Mo. I miss you. I hope things are well with you.
I'm going to try to skew the results really quick. I'm going to be right back 1 second to grab my cat. It's cat time.
Lux is trying to get you all to vote for it instead of me over the stinking cat.
Big boy.
Look at that.
Let me try to make it to where I can hear everybody again. Okay, I can hear you now.
That motherfucker's got his own orbit. He's so huge.
Hashtag Team Mitter will also get you a vote for Team Luxander. Mitter. Look at him, big boy.
I would vote for him. Look at him.
Yeah. $5 from Larry Fishman. Thank you again. Says, shaking from dysphoria flashbacks. John, testosterone made me a zombie for over 20 years. Yeah, it doesn't automatically make you feel better. I don't really know where that comes from.
That is one argument I haven't heard. Testosterone just generally makes you happier and better off. Like,
I did hear that from a doctor one time, but she was not like a good doctor.
No, I've seen some cis women will even take like low doses of testosterone when their levels aren't where they should have been to get their energy levels back up. But it's not like it just makes them happier. It's like they got their energy levels back, and that makes them happier. Anyway.
Yeah, who knows?
$5 from Skeptoidius. John is giving Ralph Wiggum, I'm a researcher energy. I don't know Ralph Wiggum, but yes, he's very researched, very serious.
Good baby. 666, thank you. Aliashana Silverbow says, dropping this super chat before my cat blocks my ability to type. The only cardinal sin I still believe in is moving a sleeping cat. Hashtag Team Lux. I don't agree with your ideology, but I respect it. I mean, if I got a cat in my lap and I have to pee, guess what? You're gonna want to get back up in my lap after I go pee, so I think you'll live. You'll live, won't you, Bubby? Okay, I'll put him down now. He's been very, very good.
And that was a Team Lux. I gotta get the shortcut keys working again, where I could just press one button and it adds a point to the given thing, but it is like so for the shortcut keys, normally it's just like, oh, for this entry in vMix, do this action. But to get it where the ticker goes up, it is like a mini code, and I forget what it is, but it's like plus minus one parentheses something something. It's annoying, and so I don't remember how to do it.
Just got to do it manually.
Yep. £5 from Sean Isherwood. This is one thing I like about maths. Once something is established, it's proven true no matter what. No reliance on chance, no interpretation needed. Yup. Numbers
that is nice.
Don't lie, baby. Although people can manipulate data.
Mm-hmm. I don't recognize symbols. I'm so bad at this. €5. I'm just going to make shit up from Sherokin, aka Stuart T. Okay, good. Thank you so much for your donation. Non-experts feel their view is equal to or superior to experts. When challenged how experts are wrong, oh no, and then they go, oh no, it's too complicated rabbit hole to get into it. Oh yeah. I love that. They're just like, well, whatever, I could explain, but I'm not going to. Let me shift topics again. We had a lot of that today. Just like, oh, you've nailed me on this one issue, therefore I'm just going to change the subject.
Yeah. Pivot. Reverse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reverse.
$5 from Louise Richardson. No message. Thank you so much, Louise. We appreciate your support.
$5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Thank you. Says, asking if someone is trans seems like asking for medical info. Remember how these same a-holes reacted when they were asked about their vax status? Oh, true. Yeah, I do think that it does kind of like border on asking about someone's medical issues, especially since we have medicalized transness so much.
Yeah, absolutely. A violation of privacy to me.
These people understand bodily autonomy when it comes to the vaccinations, though. They're suddenly like, my body, my choice.
Yeah. Whenever it comes to them. $5 from Ethan Wallace. No message, but thank you for the support. Again, I'm getting all the no message ones. Easy.
Mm-hmm. $5 from Cluckenvar says, all 3 of the pit bulls I've known have been the sweetest dogs. My husky mix, on the other hand, well, it's a good thing she's cute. Hashtag Team Lux. Yeah, pit bulls are sweethearts.
They are.
Huskies they go, ah, wah, wah, wah. That's what I know about huskies, is that they scream.
They do that. It's a shame that it's like a figure of speech in my head at all, and I should have just not used it, even though it came to my mind.
Though. Like, I think you're not wrong that pit bulls they grab and then they don't let go. And that can be like a thing that they do for play as well. Right. It's not like explicitly an aggression thing.
One of my good friends who lives here in Austin has a cute little pit bull who is so smart, such a good boy. He's just learning to like, he can say, go find this toy, and he will go get the toy in the house. Like,
nice.
Adorable. I love all his little tricks that I get the videos of when he learns them.
Cute.
$9.99 from Louise Richardson. Oops, I forgot to leave a message. In Lady Gaga's A Star Is Born, she entertained in a drag show, but Bradley Cooper just knew she was cis. What if he was wrong? Now that would be a remake. Yeah,
that would be fun.
Fair. I mean, do we know that he was wrong in his assumption? Maybe the character was trans and we just don't know.
Joe Calderone for the win. That's her drag character's name.
When Joe Calderone made the first... I remember the girl I was dating, we were very gay in high school together. When that was released, we were both like, Very, very hot. What?
It was a Luke for sure. $5 from Ethan Wallace. Thank you very much. Says, I clumsily sent 2 super chats. Oops. Take my money. I think I am bi-gender. I find a lot of confusing info on it. Do y'all think you can explain it? I mean, as I understand it, bi-gender is just like you have 2 of them. And sometimes that mean you non-binary and woman, or sometimes it mean you man and woman. I think that it's basically another way of saying like gender fluid, except maybe it's not like it flows between, there's a more clear delineation between the 2. I don't know. I don't have one. So I'm not good at explaining people who do have one.
Yeah, similar boat. To me, it seems kind of similar to the distinction between like pansexual and bisexual, where it's like
it's
there are
vibes.
like there's like minor discrepancies maybe, but a lot of people disagree on them, and it's kind of just what fits, what you like, what resonates with you. Because in my mind, every label is incomplete anyway. Like, you're always going to fail to capture the full complexity of your identity with a label in the first place. It's just convenient for talking. So it's kind of like, yeah, vibes. What works for feels right, and then if people want specifics, you can give them that. $10 from Jax Takabe and Matthew, who are the aggressors. It's the manly man without butthole behavior from misogynistic men. Vulnerable people are much safer. I had that thought during the call, and I didn't even get to it. The whole notion of vulnerability is like, okay, well, that's all predicated on the notion that like certain behaviors happen and like we don't condemn them, right? Like a lot of the vulnerabilities are things we can control for, that people don't have to be vulnerable in those situations.
True.
So silly.
$5 from Haley Geringer. Thank you. Says, I thought Matthew agreed to take a month off last time, and it's only been like 2 weeks, right? He was also on Chewed Gum this week being transphobic. Yeah, he just likes getting the smackdown, I guess, so he has to come back for more. I don't know what his deal is.
I didn't hear about that. I would love to know how he did and how the girls responded, because I love them both, and I'm sure they were great, and I'm sure they were very careful with what they said and didn't say and how they handled it, because I know they're great at what they do. But I'm very curious to see how that call went, because I don't think that's a standard kind of call for them. So interesting.
Yeah.
$5 from Atlas Die. I love watching, learning, and being entertained. Thank you. # Team Lux. Am I gonna get clobbered again? Team Arden.
I know. I was like,
up.
I was so sure that you were gonna win.
Team Arden, it's time to get your votes in. I would like to have Lux be the loser at one of these for once, and not have it win every single fucking.
I have so far won all of them. All the ones that I've been here for, anyway. $10 from Jax Takabe says, I forgot to vote in my first super chat. So here's both Team Lux and Team Lux. That's 2 votes for me. Yes.
Does that count as 2 votes? I don't know if it works that way.
I think he intended to vote. They intended to vote with the previous one, but I'll let you decide.
I don't know. Here, if we're at a tie, I'll defer to you. Yeah. You defer the win for that one.
Okay, fair enough.
666 from Leah shot a silver bow. My cat moved on her own. I swear, Matthew's misogyny is really showing. He's literally saying that some women are lesser than men. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Lux's intro to that call was iconic, and I can't wait to clip that. You're just a misogynist. We know this about you. This is so good.
I mean, I'm not trying to be disparaging. Like, we just have to take you as you are and then move from there, because yeah, that's been his whole thing the entire time, has been like women are inferior in some way, and he's trying to delineate, he's trying to like act as though that's not what he's saying, but fundamentally that is what he's saying. Like, to be strong is to be superior.
Yeah. I mean, he's also very Christian, so I'm sure he's like a compatibilist on gender.
Oh yeah, we're meant to complement each other.
Right. We have different roles, different purposes. $5 from Jay. Show me a man who can endure childbirth. Oh, and I am a biological man. I would not dare get pregnant if I could. I mean, if I could like magic a womb and don't have to go through being the experimental guinea pig of a transplant surgery, then I would love to try being pregnant. But I'm also not a man. I'm just assuming from their perspective that counts.
I think they have done it successfully with just like cis women born without one.
Yeah.
And obviously you have to give birth via C-section. But I think it has been done. Although, yeah, I probably wouldn't volunteer myself if I was a trans woman to be like the first trans woman to let's see how this works.
Yeah.
Maybe in a couple decades when you've kind of nailed it down a little bit.
Yeah. Not trying to be the guinea pig personally.
Mm-hmm. $10. Thank you so much. Elite Trainer Kenway. Sick name. Here's your daily reminder that women can pee standing up. Go fuck yourself, Jimothy. Yeah, my partner tried to tell me that like apparently there's like a skill that women taught each other of like that you could basically pee standing up and like not in the sense that it would just fall down out of your body. And I'm like, I have that anatomy and I highly doubt, sir. So I need to research a little bit and see like, is this a long lost skill that like women stopped teaching each other after they started wearing pants or something? I don't know.
I feel like I've heard that before, but I don't know if that's like a ubiquitous skill or if it's just like a thing that one individual could do and assumed that all people with that anatomy could do the same thing.
Yeah, it's a question.
Anyway, we've got 20 pounds from Jackie Greenland. A local vicar has asked me and a friend to meet with their church team to help them get their congregation to be more LGBT accepting. She knows I'm an atheist, and so this is going to be fun as I ain't holding back. Hashtag Team Arden. How cool.
That sounds fun.
I really appreciate the willingness of somebody in that position as like a religious leader to invite a trans atheist to help you understand these issues more. Yeah, that's really cool.
Hell
Good for
yeah.
you.
$4.99 from Carla J. Thank you very much. Carla says, my first time joining this show, and wow, thank you for doing this so much, this much needed work and support. Wish I could give more. Hashtag Team Everyone. Thank you. We appreciate you being here.
Yes, thank
Null
you, Carla. Unfortunately, the vote is null because it doesn't change the score at all, but we appreciate your support and welcome. I hope you find yourself comfy in our little community. $5 from Skip Toidius. You know what would be amazing? Almost miraculous, if you will? These people citing sources, actually providing the sources. Hashtag Team Dragon. Yeah, I mean, Jacob brought a source, but his source was more of like a policy shift on behalf of the Danish government with regard to how they're approaching gender care for minors. It's not really like it wasn't a, what do you call it? Like a review of the data. Why am I blanking on what that's called?
Yeah, it was not a meta-analysis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was just like an article about the changing policy. Hashtag Team Dragon. You better give me my point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Thank you for the reminder.
I'm just teasing anyway. While you're doing that, SEK 100. Thank you. Puck Thollander says the changed policy for hormone blockers and HRT for trans youth in Sweden has led to parents smuggling in medicine they obtained for their children abroad. How could that be progress? Hashtag Team Arden. Yeah, that's the thing. People will get it. It's like abortion. The rate of abortion doesn't change if you make abortion illegal. People just do it unsafely.
Yep.
And it's the same thing here. We're just going to like get it on the gray market or the black market if you make it illegal.
And what's so frustrating, not to spend time me talking on one that you read, but it's just like the medical community worked this out. The reason we moved to the model of like informed consent was because trans advocates were talking about this problem. If you don't give them medicine, it's not going to stop them from taking it. It's going to stop them from doing it safely with a medical professional. So why don't we just enable them to get that medicine with the guidance of somebody who's informed on medicine? Like these are things we sorted out like a decade ago, but like some people are just showing up to the fucking party and being like, wait a minute, how come we haven't tried this way of doing things? And it's like, oh my fucking God, like,
how do we know it's not just a delusion? Like, because we tried to treat it like one already. Okay, we've done this before.
Like, it's so irritating. $10 from Jonathan. Kudos to both y'all for service. For the service of educating. Any thoughts on social perception of autistic folks versus trans folks? I feel society views both groups as, oh, you are such victims and need help. I don't know if people view trans people that way. I think people view detrans people that way. I think people view autistic people as like unable to make informed decisions about their own bodies and their own identities, which is why what's his name, Ryan or whatever, brought up, like, non sequitur, brought up fucking autistic people, because it was like, he's trying to be like, oh, well, these people are incapable of making decisions and having awareness of their own body, so that should be a problem. It's like, you're just wrong on every, like, perspective of what you've said. It's, ugh.
I do think, like, because of the medicalization, and particularly the, like, psychological medicalization of transness, that there maybe is a situation where people think of trans folks as a victim of, like, oh, you're just mentally ill. But especially, like, the way that people talk about trans people assigned female, we are definitely treated like, oh, such a poor victim. And, like, that was like a running theme in some of the calls today, where it's like, oh, but girls are trans more often now, and they can't discern fucking basic things about their lived realities.
Yeah.
There's definitely an infantilization there that I think is similar to how people treat autistic folks, and like double worse bad if you are both autistic and trans.
I also, on that note, I have a regret from today, which is that I have a tendency to use the language that somebody is using to make it clear in a conversation, like, what I'm talking about from their perspective. But
Yeah.
I feel like on a few occasions it could have been confusing to viewers, because when I'm saying, like, girls referring to trans boys, it sucks.
We're just trying to match the energy.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying to, like, use their frame of reference so that the communication isn't stunted by something as stupid as, like, the words that we're using, you know, like, the concepts matter more. But it is frustrating and sometimes probably confusing for the audience. Yeah.
I don't know who's. It doesn't matter
you.
anymore. $5 from Skeptoidius. Thank you very much. What if a trans woman entered a bathroom and, oh, I don't know, what if a leprechaun fell out of my butt? Since we're talking about shit that doesn't happen, for fuck's sake. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, people just don't understand. Like, trans folks don't want to deal with conflict most of the time. We don't, even before the risk of being arrested, there has always been the risk of being accosted or assaulted. And so, yeah, like, when I used to have the option to choose which public bathroom I would use until it became illegal in Kansas, I'm like, okay, what do I think I look like today? How am I going to get the least amount of resistance in this situation? So yeah, a trans woman who's early in her process and still has a beard and stuff is not going to go into a women's bathroom. It's just not going to happen. It's insane. People just do not have the ability to conceive what being trans is like, apparently.
It's really hard for these dum-dums.
Empathy.
$10 from Crystal B. Love the show you guys put on. I want to ask how one would go about exploring analyzing their own gender identity as an adult, as well as addressing imposter syndromes in regard to that. I think this is probably a good topic for a call. We'll talk a little bit about it since you spent $10, obviously, but I would recommend calling in. I think we've said on the show many times that the one universal trans experience is the feeling that you're not trans enough. So I think the imposter syndrome is pretty expected and universal. It's one of those things where, like, when we're talking about gender identity, it is an internal sense of yourself, right? Just like your sense of what ice cream you like, and, like, you know, how good you are at a certain thing. Like, you're evaluating your internal experience of reality. And so you have to leave room for the fact that it is a little bit subjective. And let's posit that you play around a little. You cut your hair, you change your name, you just use different pronouns of different groups of people. What's the real risk of that? If you have good people in your life who love you and accept you, they're going to accept you even if in 6 months you go, actually, I don't think that applies to me. I was just kind of trying it out and it didn't work for me. I think they'd be like, cool, we're glad you figured it out. And we love that we could be there for you along that way. Like, I think it's totally okay to play with things to a certain extent. And I've also said breaking it down into, don't put it under, like, you know, any individual act under the category of transition. Be like, if getting laser hair removal, like, you don't like facial hair, you don't have to transition to want to remove facial hair from your face. Like, that can be an act totally separate. And if along the way you find out, I think I'm a woman and now I'm here and transitioned, then that's fine. Or, you know, whatever, like, reverse equivalent you want to, like, put on that. Yeah, I don't know. You have any thoughts on that, Lux?
No notes.
Word. I'm just too good at my job.
True. £5 from MJ. Thank you, MJ. For dealing with John and Jacob's endless new points when their point was proved wrong, it has to be team ass ripping Arden. Yeah.
Thank you.
You just like really tore into people today. It was good.
Oh my god. Well, I'm glad everyone likes it because, there has to be some payoff for my nervous system getting activated that way. $5 from Cluckenvar. Suck on rocks, you bag of farts. Arden Hart 2024 hashtag Team Arden. Thank you. All right, got some Arden votes coming in. I might actually have a chance at winning this. I feel like Kamala.
close.
I'm coming up in the latter half of the race.
Oh gosh. $9.99 from Jason. Thank you. It says hashtag Team Snack Mom. Rock chewing fart bags are not nicer people. Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
Oh goodness.
$4.99 hashtag Team Snack. But your cat is beautiful. Thank you. Oh my god.
He's a good boy.
I went from 2 down to 2 up. What is happening?
$10 from Mr. Borakwa10 says, my sperm donor is a bigot, thinks gender dysphoria is a hoax, the APA, AMA, WHO, etc. are liars, thinks that people just wake up and choose their gender, will not change his mind. How to deal? Hashtag team Mitternacht. I don't know that there is a way to deal in that situation. Like, if you're so deeply entrenched that you think that these medical organizations that collate their opinions based on like all of the available data, I'm a skeptic. I don't know how to reach people who are like that. I mean, unless you want to just go with the angle of like, so what if people just choose their gender? Why can't they just live happily anyway? Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes you have to just accept where people are at and then go like, so what would be the problem then? Or like, why would that be bad?
Yep, absolutely. Boundaries sometimes help too. Just don't even, that conversation is done with this group. 10 alleged Australian dollars from Freya Australis. Does Jimmy Snow have a podcast? Hashtag Team Arden. I think he does. I think I heard that once.
I think maybe. $10 from YouTuber Grudge says hashtag Team Lux because I gotta go stick with my team. Sorry, Arden. Okay,
all right.
We'll forgive you.
I won't, but it's okay. $5 from Mr. Boricua 10. Also, he is of the mind that the DSM-5 is all bullshit, yet he accepts gay people as is. Also, Lee, Matthew, and John calls were infuriating. Hashtag Team Arden. Yeah, I mean,
it was wild today.
It's interesting because there are some people who will accept that gender affirming care is the medical consensus among medical professionals, but often they'll say, "Oh, but medical institutions are just captured by woke ideology," and so they're
capitalist,
right? It's like, it's amazing that you've acknowledged that the medical consensus disagrees with you, but you found a way to manipulate that to still be, but my bigoted position is still the right one.
$5 from Adrian Morgan. Thank you. Says, women, if they have kids, are only pregnant or giving birth a few times in their lives. What does he think they're doing the rest of the time? Hashtag Team Lux. True. Like, do you think that women are not prepared to like defend themselves if like, oh no, like someone invades the home while my husband is out hunting? Like, guess what? I also am capable of swinging an axe. Like, I don't know. People are dumb.
Guess I'm just gonna get murdered. I guess I'm just gonna let it happen.
I guess I'll die. Yeah.
$5 from Melissa Driver. Jacob, following systemic review of evidence found in Europe, the subsequent reversal of gender affirming paradigm has shifted in favor of a different approach. Following the systemic review of evidence found in Europe, the subsequent reversal of gender affirming paradigm.
Is it like saying that like Jacob is claiming that this article is alluding to evidence, even if that article itself was not presenting evidence? It's like, we're just assuming that this was done based on like a comprehensive review.
I mean, there's things like the CAS review that are out there that you could point to, but there are so many problems with the CAS review. And if people want to bring those evidences, I'm happy to have you do that. But that's going to be a very different call than pointing to a policy and trying to pretend that that is evidence of an efficacy in trans healthcare, because it's not. It might reference evidence, but it is not the evidence itself. So if you're defending him, thanks for the $5. I'll
Appreciate
take more
it.
of your money.
$5 from Jamnik06 says, a snake walks into a bar. The bartender says, how did you do that? Hashtag Team Mother of Danger Noodles. That's a good one. I enjoyed that.
Thank you, Jamnik. $5 from Mr. Boricua 10. Or was it the Jacob call and not Lee? Was I mistaken? Either way, one of those calls was really infuriating while I was at work. Rah, hashtag Team Arden. Yeah, I don't know which one it was either. They all kind of blend together in my mind. I'm like, I vaguely remember what they were talking about, but I can't hold on to that. If I held on to that stuff, I would be unwell. Like, that's why I show up and I do these calls and then I let it go for the next week, you know?
Mm-hmm. I'm just not going to think about it after this. $5 from Jamnik06 says, snakes measure their length in inches, hence, since they don't have feet. Hashtag Team Mother of Danger Noodles. Thank you, Jamnik. I'm going to lose this one.
I can't believe I might actually win one. And what is the poll putting us on?
I think we're at cis men are the worst, or whatever that is.
It's a very narrow lead, so yeah. It could switch to sandals at the end. Make sure you vote in the chat poll for which. Remember, the person who loses has to defend that position for 2 minutes straight. So it's beautiful.
Well, I'm going to do it for 2 minutes gay.
Oh, fair. $5 from President Starscream. Hashtag Team Arden, because no one believes that snakes are friend-shaped. They are friend-shaped. I just got a false water cobra, and he is so cute. He has these big eyes, and they're like, they're very intelligent. And so he'll like come out and move up to the front of the enclosure when he like sees you. And usually he doesn't want to like be touched, but he like is aware that an interaction is happening and he's like craving it to a certain extent. It's so cool. I love it.
That's fun.
Snakes are so fascinating. Endlessly.
I think hognoses are especially friend-shaped.
They're so cute.
Yeah. $5 from Andy Placeres. Thank you. Says this is for hashtag Team Lux and the upcoming move to the PNW. I left Kansas for the PNW years ago. It was such a refreshing move. Sorry, Arden. Thank you. Thank you very much. Valid. I appreciate that. I do have a GoFundMe for that too. But you know, it's already got a lot of money, so I don't. If people don't donate to it, it's fine. It's coming up soon though.
$5 from Jamnik06. It's common later in life for snakes to get erectile dysfunction. Hashtag Viagra for snakes. Hashtag Team Mother of Danger Noodles. Jamnik06 is out here carrying Team Arden on your back. You poor thing. It's all right. The rest of Team Arden is here in spirit.
$10 from Ryan P. Thank you very much. Says, didn't get to watch the show live, but here's some money anyway. Hashtag Team Ben. Chaos vote.
Thank you, Ryan P. 50 Norwegian dollarinos from Arsenic 1987. They're eating the dogs. They're going into your bathrooms. They're invading your locker rooms. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Hashtag Team Arden. Hashtag best producer. Thank you. And last but not least,
$4.99 from Kane. Thank you. Great show, you guys. Was funny watching Matthew come back from the hang up yesterday. Hashtag Team Arden. Appreciate you.
Thank you guys so much. That was the last super, so it looks like finally Luxander has lost one of these competitions, and now it has to defend that cis het white men are the best. So that's fun for you.
It's so hard.
All right, hold on. Let me get this all prepped up here. This het white men have it the hardest. And very narrowly fit in this little box here, but all right. Let's do... Sorry. I'm getting used to how I can get this prepared more quickly. I will work on some strategies, so there's not me just sitting around here fucking around. All right. Clock is charging up in 3, 2, 1.
Okay, well, obviously, cis-het men have it the hardest, okay? Cis-het white men in particular, okay? They literally built this country, okay, off the sweat of their backs, right? And it's so hard because there are so many men on dating apps and not very many women, and it's really hard to get attention. So that also is a thing that makes it super difficult. It's so much easier for gay men on the gay dating apps because there's just dong slinging everywhere. And also, like, being a man, you have to like work really hard. There's like absolutely no choice but for you to work a hard labor job. You have to work construction. That's what they're good for. You come home and your wife's like, get in the garage and fix that thing, and it's like so hard. There's like a never-ending series of tasks to do. And being cis, God, don't even get me started on being cis. It's like the most difficult. You're like stuck in this rigid set of gendered expectations, and you can't even wear nail polish without getting beat up by your best friend. And like everybody expects you to have a boner 24/7. And that's really difficult to maintain because it's really hard to think at the same time as having a boner. So, it's like, it's just really challenging. And your wife's like, get in the bedroom. And you're like, I don't.
Oh no, what's happening? Luxander's technology.
I'm
back. You're back.
Okay. I don't know why this keeps happening. Anyway, your wife says, get in the bedroom, and you have to throw your keyboard, and you're like, I hate it here. And that's why it sucks to be a cishet white man. The timer looked like it was much lower than it was. Anyway,
right.
It's hard to keep it up for 2 solid minutes, just like it's hard to keep up a boner for 2 solid minutes. Listen. Just one last one in there at the end.
Oh my God.
Oh man.
No, the last bit about like get in the bedroom made me think of that meme where the guy is like outside with a cigarette and he's like, like again.
I was referencing a particular cartoon where she's like, stop playing video games and get in the bedroom. And he's like, I hate it here. Like, yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much. I saw Jamnico6 sent another super chat. Please don't coil back as I slither in more snake puns. I don't want to be constricted as I find them appealing. Some might say they're hysterical. Thank you so much, Jamnik. Also, I'm going to be on the Transpositions show tonight, starting at 7 over on the Transpositions channel. If you guys are here, you probably know what they are. Just type in Transpositions Transgender. You're going to see Stephanie Helms there, and Bree, and Ember, and Carly Chardonnay Webb. I don't think Carly's going to be there tonight. But I will be there starting at 7 p.m. Central Time. So if you didn't get enough of my ugly mug, check me out there. Next week, I think it's going to be Ben and I, but it's not totally locked in yet. You'll see the events get posted over the next like day or two, and then you can go put your notifications on all of them. Anything you want to say before we close out, Lex?
Thank you, Ryan P, for that super chat sliding in at the last minute. Says, thank you, Lex. I do have it hard. No one ever sticks up for me. Woe is me. I appreciated this, even when the woke mob froze your video. I know, canceled by the woke mob yet again. I don't even know what it is. I have a brand new video card. I don't know what the problem is.
That's so weird.
Whatever.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
If you want to get your name scrolling up on the side of the end of our shows like this, you can go to patreon.com/calltheline. You get access to monthly exclusive podcasts where you get to know the host of The Line a little bit better. Lots of other interesting stuff. I'm stumbling over my words, and we are almost through the list, so thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Thank you, Jamnik.